Texas!
He's a 10.
I choose this family.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 135 of 911 Lone Star Roundup. I'm one of your hosts, Grace, and with me are my lovely co-hosts, Katie and EJ.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Today, we'll be talking about 911 again. Of course, the original, not Lone Star, sadly, because we're gearing up for season 8, the second half, 8B, to come back in just a few weeks. So we're talking about 805 today and 806, titled Masks and Confessions. And of course, we have so much to talk about. We've obviously been sitting on these episodes for a few months now, so just a lot going on here. So we're just gonna get straight into it. I will say before we get into this that I watched these episodes for the first time a couple hours before our point of recording this. I obviously have known a lot of what happened in these episodes for the last couple of months, but I had not had the courage to approach this for a while. So my feelings on these are still really fresh because this was always the first time I'd experienced them. But I know that EJ and Katie, you guys had watched them back when they came out. So
Yeah.
you had definitely have more time to sit on things. So I'll be interested to see our different thoughts and perspectives with those differences. So going straight into 805 Masks, it's Halloween, and I'm so happy we have a Halloween episode again. When did we stop doing holiday episodes? So it's great. We open up and Hen, Karen, the kids are dressed up as characters from The Wizard of Oz, which was absolutely amazing. Their costumes were great, of course.
Yeah, I love it.
Great. And Maddie is thanking Karen for taking G trick-or-treating, and they're all taking photos, and it's really cute. Karen was saying, oh, wait until you see trick-or-treating on actual Halloween. And Hen's like, I wish. And Karen's like, well, what if you do more than wish? She wants her to not have to work, but Hen says how she can't do that. Hen says how she feels guilty bailing on everyone at the house, especially when they still have to work. But Karen says how this is Mara's first Halloween with them. And so Hen promises she'll talk to Bobby. And this is not necessarily a new thing. Obviously, it's difficult having a job like this and balancing a family as well. And we've seen Hen struggle with this before. We've seen Chimney struggle with this before.
It's a typical parent thing they struggle with.
Yeah, it really is. It's tough too because it's Ken's not the only one that has kids. Obviously Jim, they have G, and I know at Chris is in Texas, but when Chris was here, Eddie had Chris and he was a single father. So it's tough because it's if one person takes off, it's just well, what about all these other people?
Yeah, I agree with Hen. I also would have felt guilty if I had bailed and, I'd gotten to do it, but my other coworkers hadn't.
Right.
Especially for some of them, it's, again, as we say here, that it's Amara's first Halloween, but I think they did say it was G's first time trick-or-treating.
Right.
So, a lot of firsts happening. And it's obviously difficult for them to miss. And it's also sad because Maddie's also working on Halloween. So neither of G's parents are going to be able to be there. And it's tough. And I don't know if I just hadn't heard about the storyline, if I'd forgotten about it. But when we opened with that, I was like, oh, we're getting straight into this. It's always a thing because, what are you going to do? You can't stop being a parent, but you've got a job to do. And it's such a balance thing, and either way you're going to feel like you're failing in one aspect or the other,
right?
And even if you feel like you win in one area, then you've got the next holiday to think about, or it's a never-ending battle. So we're immediately opening up on an interesting topic. So then we go to Athena, and she is doing a dare presentation in a high school. And at first, it just looks like she's telling spooky stories around a campfire.
I know.
I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it's winds up being a message about drunk driving. And as can be expected, this is a high school. Kids think they know better. Kids think they're above all that. Just watching the scene kept making me think, there's a high school between where I live now and where I used to live. And I regularly did the trek growing up between these two locations. So I pass this high school regularly, and for years, they had a car out front that was completely and utterly wrecked. Like, we're talking the roof was smashed in. Like, I don't know the story behind that car, but honestly, I'd be really surprised if someone had made it out of whatever wreckage that was. And they had it up there for a while, and my guess is that that was a warning against drunk driving and like seeing the consequences. I honestly ought to look into that story, but right there next to the school, there are also a bunch of crosses alongside the road. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with that. And so when I was watching the scene, like that kept popping into my brain. And also just like how many accidents happen because of, young, stupid kids that make one dumb mistake, and that all it takes is one dumb mistake. So obviously these kids are being idiots. And there are two girls in particular that are completely ignoring Athena and being very disrespectful about it too. They're giggling, they're showing each other their phones, they're being disruptive. Like, there's one thing to ignore the person presenting, but then there's being disruptive and disrespectful like that. And Athena, of course, she's not having this. She's like, I'm sorry, am I bothering you? And they're like, no, you're fine.
I love that scene.
Same. And the teacher just being like, welcome to my world. That was so real. Like, I'm
Right.
just like, totally. Also, this honestly just reminded me of things about like Dare, because when I was in 5th grade, we had Dare. And then we had to write an essay after whatever we finished the class or whatever. And so like we all wrote essays, and then like I think it was like each for like the grade or whatever. I think it was like each team, because there was like different teachers and whatever, there'd be like different teams, I think. And so like mine ended up being the winner, and then I had to read it in front of like either
Oh,
the whole grade. I think it was the whole grade. So that's what that reminded me of. I was just like, oh, yep.
Yeah, Athena was showing pictures. When I was
uh-huh.
in high school, their favorite thing to do was so that one of our gym teachers was head of MAD, which is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And she had a chapter of SAD at our school, Students Against Drunk Driving. And every year in like May, they would bring like a bunch of like crashed up cars onto our football field and like actually ask students to be play actors, and like they would go through a whole like skit of like what it's like to get into a crash and like what it's like being drunk and all the, I mean, they
Oh
went
yeah.
all in. I
Mm.
was like, it was emotional because you're seeing your classmates out on the field, and they're totally like, a couple of them were literally put in body bags and carried off the field to,
Well, that's traumatizing.
yeah, you're like
Yeah.
15, 16, 17 years old.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Also, like, I remember, I don't think I ever did this, but like in junior high or high school, they had like in one of the health classes, it was like for drunk driving to like go, like you would put on like the goggles or whatever they had
Oh
to
yeah.
like, yeah, I just remember, I think I saw pictures of it. I don't think we did that at my class, but I know they did it in classes in my school, but I remember that.
Yeah. I never had Dare because I was homeschooled.
Right.
I guess you could say my edition of it was having two cop parents or two ex-cop parents.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say when I did driver's ed, because I did driver's ed rather recently. I did it no more than 3 years ago. I they had some pretty extensive lessons as far as drunk driving goes, and they shared a lot of stories. And I didn't just listen to the stories, like I really took them in. Then I went and researched on my own later a lot of those stories that they presented to us, and I really internalized them, like to the point I am very strict with myself. I do not drive when I've had any alcohol unless it's been
Right.
multiple hours and a solid meal,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I know that I'm not intoxicated to any degree. But like even then, it's a toss up on whether I'll even risk that. Like, I am extremely strict with myself. And I wish, obviously I wish more people were, but I know obviously they're showing teens this. So
Yeah,
the hope only is that people internalize it,
Yeah.
it's true.
but I can only imagine what that was like with like a classroom full of peers. I think I would just be sobbing half the time,
Right.
honestly. Oh yeah, that was certainly a thing,
Yeah.
thing that happened. And then we go to the 118 game, ready for Halloween. They're doing a haunted house deal, and I'm like, hell yeah, this is the antics I'm prepared for.
Right.
All I needed was a crow to show up and start sulking chimney again, and him
Yes.
to be unsure whether this is the same crow as a few years
Oh,
before.
right.
Actually, it would have been great if they'd had like a murder of crows, because that's
Yeah.
what they call a group of crows, is
Right.
murder. Just have a murder of crows just following him around.
Yeah.
Please, I wanted that so badly.
Croning.
The crowning. Oh my gosh. But Chim's saying, well, it's not as scary. And he's like, what about fake blood? And it's like, just like real blood, fake blood is no different. It's hard to clean up. And Chim's obviously wanting to make this all out haunted house. And I think he keeps having to be reminded that this is for children
Yeah.
of all ages. And he's like, oh.
Yeah.
But I was like, I love it. I love Chim. He's great.
Yeah.
But then Eddie's talking about how Chris is apparently done with Halloween. He thinks trick-or-treating is cringe, and he tells Chim to enjoy it with G while he still can. And oh, that's bittersweet. That's bittersweet, because just a few seasons ago we had that adorable scene of them trick-or-treating together, or at least them costumed together, and now Chris
Right.
has outgrown it.
Yeah. It is that age where, like, I think once you get to like 13, 14, like you either still love it or like you don't want not to say that you don't want to like do anything, but like some kids like they're like, okay, well I'm done with trick or treating, but they might like hang out with their friends or like go to like some type of like event. Like I know like around here we have like I've never gone to it because I cannot stand scary things. But there's like horror
Me
nights and
neither.
stuff like that. But
I
yeah,
mean, I think there's definitely a period of time, and this is not the same for everybody, but I think there's a period of time where like the kids grow out of it, and then they become either like older teens or adults that might get back into it because they're old enough to not give a fuck anymore.
Right.
The first time I went trick-or-treating was when I was 19. So I will not say I had the same experience at all as anybody, but I would do it again. I am 23. I don't care anymore. Candy's
I
candy.
I was
hey, I
totally
don't care
done
as
with
long as you have
that.
a costume on. I literally don't care.
Also,
I-
it's easier to hide when behind a child if you have a child around to hide behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was totally done by like 6th grade. I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. This is stupid.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think I was like,
Well,
I think the last time I went, I was like 16, and that's only, I was like, it wasn't fun because people would be like, make comments of like, oh, you're older, or like and I was only like 16, and I'm like, there's people that like go when they're like well into the 20s. I think it's okay.
Right.
So I was just like, you know what,
just
I'm done.
we need to let kids just be able to be kids for as long as they want to, honestly. Let them go
Yeah.
trick-or-treating. What the hell?
Well,
Mhm.
yeah,
Uh,
like seriously, because honestly, they could be doing way worse things, and
They'll be
as
doing
long as
drugs.
you're
They
like
could be doing
polite,
bad pranks.
yeah, not even that. Like they could literally be underage drinking, doing drugs, that kind of stuff. Like just let them, if as long as they're like, they're polite and whatever, like just let them be.
Hey, I mean, that's what I say whenever I feel self-conscious about all my book hobby. I'm like, well, I could be doing drugs.
Oh,
It could be a
agreed,
lot
agreed. That's
worse.
me with everything.
Mhm.
Like, hey, yeah, you can excuse a lot by that. But yeah, so definitely a little bittersweet. Obviously, it's bittersweet for Eddie on multiple points because he learned this through his mom. It's not even Chris who told him it himself.
Right.
So that was going to be hard for Eddie no matter what, but it's definitely still hard for him. And then Buck shows up with a mummy from a prop house.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
this is a very convincing dummy.
Yeah, very convincing.
Very, very. Mhm.
It was creepy. Like I'm just like, what is this?
And I think Bobby did at one point go, this is supposed to be for kids. There's like, nah, they'll love it. We all know that Buck loves kids, but he's not always great with his instincts with them. Like, spoiling Santa Claus for a whole bunch of kids at the
Oh,
grocery
I
store.
forgot
God,
about that.
yes.
again, he loves them. He's great with them. That doesn't mean he knows when to turn it down. But okay, you know what? We'll roll with this. Some kids have seen a lot worse by that point. So then we go into, they're doing the whole haunted house thing. Bobby being Cat Dracula made my
That was so good.
Dracula. And I was like, you know what? It's so cheesy, but Bobby's doing it. And he's doing it so well. Hell yeah. He's in full grandpa mode. I'm sorry. He is doing great. That was obviously very adorable. They're going through. I think Eddie kind of failed at scaring them at all, but Hen and Chim did a pretty good job. And then, Buck's trying to be country, so there goes the southern drawl.
It was so funny, but like
As one of all of us who's most southern, I'm just
Yeah.
listening and I'm like, oh no. And this is Oliver, who's already doing an American accent because he's British, doing a
Right.
Southern American accent. And honestly, for that, not that bad actually, but it was really
I think anybody that does an accent that's not like their authentic voice or like their authentic accent, it's going to be bad.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that's just how it goes. So honestly, it's supposed to be bad. So honestly, it's fine.
And you know what? Out of all the accents, a Southern drawl is not that hard. You just lose a couple consonants along the way and
Mhm.
just slur everything together like you're half into a bottle of whiskey, and you're already doing great. Throw a couple y'alls in there, and no one will know the difference.
Right?
But he's got his dummy there. It's got the candy bowl in the mummy's lap, which great strategic placing if it wasn't so creepy looking. And then one girl's like, oh, I don't like the arm. So Buck goes to move it, and then the arm comes out.
And I'm like,
And he's
no.
like, I'm like, Buck!
Right.
Obviously,
But it's
like,
such a Buck thing to do.
It is.
Also,
It
how
is.
could he have known, honestly? Like, you're not gonna buy a mummy from a prop house and go, I wonder if this is real. Because surely someone would have said
Mhm.
shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, Buck bucked, but also it wasn't his fault. That's
No. It
not
wasn't.
on him. I mean, did he handle it like a professional, well-trained person who handles things under pressure? Sure. But also, I guess how else are you gonna respond to that?
Yeah.
I probably would have thrown it across the firehouse, let's be real. And that probably would traumatize a lot more people.
Oh yeah. It
Just
definitely
imagine
would
you're
have been
like,
tossed.
been like, oh, look at the cobwebs, just get spit across the face with a mummified human arm. Like, yeah, that'd work. And then we move on. I would just like to say that at the end of that scene, Chim and Buck trying so hard to keep the haunted house open when they have to close. Yeah, brothers-in-law, truly. Then we move on. We have a call where a dad gets his head stuck in a pumpkin.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if this happened in real life.
Oh, I for sure did.
Mhm.
So this isn't even a small pumpkin. This is a giant pumpkin. And turns out he was having like an allergic reaction because like the pumpkin was rotted because he'd had it for like over a month. So like his face swelled and everything just kind of knocked in.
Yeah.
And then he like started inhaling pumpkin bits, so then he couldn't breathe. Everything just went bad for this poor, what's his name? Frederick Franklin? I forget what his name was. But poor dude. Poor dude, that sucked. And then the guy saying thanks, and how he feels dumb, nearly being killed by a pumpkin. And our most beloved Buck decides it's a great idea to say, that's okay, you do this job long enough, you see people get hurt in much dumber ways, just as he slips on a part of the pumpkin and falls and lands on his shoulder, and even he says he thinks he dislocated his shoulder. And I'm like,
yep.
You mean like that, Buck? Like that?
It's like, let's not speak it into existence.
Right? That's like saying the Q word.
Yeah.
Or like being like, wow, this hasn't happened in a while.
And then be like, don't say that. Yeah. And then we cut to Buck in the hospital. He's gotten his shoulder popped back into place, and he's been told that he can resume light duty next shift. And the whole time, Eddie's in the corner shaking his head with a magazine, like he's just like, I'm on babysitting duty, and I don't like it. And then Tommy shows up, and he had overheard the doctor speaking, so he's like, "Oh, that's good news." And Buck's like, "Yeah, for the moment." And Tommy's like, "For the moment, what does that mean?" And then he's just like, "Don't ask, don't even ask."
Right?
Oh my god! And then Buck explains how he brought in a dummy, and it turned out to be a corpse. And Tommy has heard about that on the dispatch.
Yeah.
And he starts to say that like everyone at Harbor Station, and Buck's face was like, what were you guys saying? And Tommy just obviously takes the fork in the road and trails off into was very concerned.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm like,
love
I'm
Eddie
pretty
sitting
sure
there.
it's-
Don't ask.
yeah.
It's like I have missed this friendship like trio.
The trio
Where-
is great.
I love them
Like, it's the
together.
best trio ever because you got the best friend and the boyfriend. So, like, it's like the best of both worlds, essentially, because you just got, like, it's like Eddie's known Buck longer, so he knows, like, the things that, like, set him off, I guess is a good way to put it. And then, like,
He does.
Tommy, like, knows some things, but he's, like, learning. And it's just, like, the two of them could just communicate. Like,
And-
it's great.
And Tommy and Eddie both have like a drier sense of like humor and
Yes.
a slightly like more like sarcastic personality. Some of it I wonder if it's like the military as well. Like they're both ex-military, so I'm like, I
Oh,
wonder if that's
true.
part of it. But also
Mhm.
like they both obviously I just have this picture in my mind of, you know, Buck just like floating up off the ground ascending towards his theories, and Eddie and Tommy have like one leg each and they're just trying to pull him back down to earth, because that's what this entire scene was.
Basically.
And so Buck goes on to say, he's like, it isn't funny. And he ripped the guy's arm right out of his socket. And he's like, and but it's 15 traumatized kids. Like, Eddie's not helping at all. Like, he is just feeding this. And Tommy's trying to keep up. I'm loving this entire scene. And Buck says, you know, then on the next call, his arm gets popped out of the socket, the same arm. And Buck's like, does that sound like a coincidence? And Tommy's like, what else could it be other than a coincidence? And Buck's like, it's a curse. And we're all like, oh no.
Oh, here we go again.
Okay, good luck, Tommy. And then Buck, you know, he's like, I took his arm and now Billy Boyles took mine. And he's like, I told you not to.
I told yeah, literally, I told you not to ask. And it's like, yeah, don't ever ask.
Right.
Mhm. And then Buck says while he was waiting, he called Sergeant Grant, and Eddie goes, Bobby's wife. And I think we're all over here like, Eddie, Tommy knows who Athena is. Like, not only did he help rescue them last season, he knew Athena and Bobby before the two of them did. He was part of the OG. He was there during
Right.
he was there during the rooster call.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. He knew he knew Athena is Athena, like the sergeant,
mhm.
not
And he's gotta
Athena
know
as
they're-
Bobby's wife. He was there before they were even together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and probably after the rescue call last season, like he knows they're married. Like they
Yeah,
literally hugged and
right.
kissed in front of everybody. Like,
Right.
sure, okay, my platonic sidekick police sergeant. Okay, I'm just gonna kiss him. I don't know. It's yeah, okay. Good job, Eddie. In any case, so Buck asked him for an update on, you know, the investigation when he called Sergeant Grant, and apparently the prop house bought Billy from a carnival who got him from a novelty shop who got him
Yeah.
from a rodeo. And Tommy's like, and there's just this long dramatic pause, and Tommy's like, is there a twist coming? And Buck's like, oh, there's a twist. The novelty shop burned down in 93. The carnival was wiped out by a hurricane in 97. And the rodeo ended after a stampede. And he's like, well, I'm not actually sure what year that happened. And Tommy's like, and you think that all these things are connected? And Buck's like, oh yeah, once Billy gets you in his sights. Eddie's just staring at Buck at this point. And then he goes, he finishes the job. And
I love it.
Tommy's face is shocked, and then Eddie bursts out laughing, and Tommy bursts out laughing, and they're just dying. And Buck looks so sulky. He's like,
He's so serious
"Guys,
about the
it's
whole
not
thing.
funny."
Right.
It's
It
like
really
he's like,
is.
I'm serious. We know you're serious, but it's just funny because oh, Buck and his curses.
Then his boyfriend and his best friend are just losing their shit.
Mhm.
Literally.
They're both, they're pragmatic. They don't think like that. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, Buck. We believe you. Ay, ay, ay. So then we go to Hen is going home, and Karen is helping Mara put more glitter on her costume because she wanted more sparkle. And Denny and Mara leave the room since Karen is asking Hen, have you asked Bobby about taking Halloween off? And Hen tells Karen that Bobby didn't say no, but he told Chim he could take off to be with G, or she could take off. So it's neither or situation. And Hen thought it didn't seem right, so neither of them took off. And Karen, Karen's taking this hard. She's taking 3 kids trick-or-treating. It's not even about that, but Karen's telling Hen that she can't make up the big moment she's missing. And same things as we said before. It's a difficult position to be in.
Right.
And then we go back to Buck and Tommy. So we're at Buck's loft now. And Buck is looking up this Billy dude. And Tommy brings some fresh ice pack and some ibuprofen. He's fluffing his pillow. He's replacing his ice pack. He's just absolutely adorable. It's domestic. I'm just like, oh. I was in my feels. And Buck is so obsessed with this, like, with this whole Billy thing. Like he of course he acknowledges what Tommy's saying to him, but he barely takes his eyes off the phone's, like, the computer screen. And Tommy's like, okay, time for bed. Good night, Evan. And he's trying to get Buck to go to bed, and he's sleeping on the couch to be next to Buck. And Buck just keeps trailing on, like he him up. And I'm like, oh no. Well, you didn't sign up for this.
Literally, it's like just the fact that, and he keeps talking about it, and Tommy's just like, "Good night, Evan." Like, good night. Let's actually go to bed now. And it is. It's just like I don't even know. It's funny because Buck has this like habit of like just with different things. He like gets like I don't know. He gets in like research mode almost like something happens and Buck is obsessed, which I totally understand. Like I think we all have our ways with that in different ways, but it's funny and I love seeing it.
It's always good to see Buck go on a research deep dive,
which he does a lot.
Oh yeah. It's I will say it's like the ADHD. I think we go down rabbit holes very easily. So then the next morning, Tommy brings, breakfast to Buck, which is very cute. And he's like, I think someone was up too late last night with their cowboy. And Buck's like, yeah, you got me. And Tommy puts down the tray of food, and when he looks at Buck, he just flinches out like, oh. And Buck, says, what is it? And Tommy's like, Evan, don't freak out, but there's something going on. And Buck asks for his phone. And I was like, maybe we should just. And Buck's like, phone. So Tommy hands him his phone with the camera pulled up. And he looks at his face, which has boils all over it.
Right.
Oh, and he's like, I knew it. It's Billy Boyle.
I'm like, oh my god. It's just like that whole part of that scene. I'm just like, oh my god.
It's one of those scenes where like it pulls to mind like one of those instances of, well, they're never beating the allegations now kind of feel. So Eddie comes over and he's treating them, and Buck says, you can say it. And he's like, that's not that bad. Or it's not bad. And he's like, oh, it's not that bad. And Buck's like, I told you guys Billy wasn't done with me. And Eddie's like, please don't start with this stupid curse again. And Buck's like, Billy Boyles, hello, Boyles. What are the odds? And Eddie's like, well, it's probably from the rotten pumpkin, guys. Yeah, they fell into the coal. And Tommy's like, didn't tell me about that part. There's your answer. And Buck's not convinced. And he may have a point that the reaction would have happened sooner if that was the case. But they're both like, no, it's not a curse. And then Eddie tells Buck that this curse talk is spinning him out, and Tommy's like, listen to the medic. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Then
that
we
was
go
an
straight.
interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, just a bit.
Like, oh, poor Buck.
Yeah. Fuck.
Then we go straight to them being on shift, and Buck's face looks worse, and he like sneaks up behind Eddie and scares the shit because Eddie turns around and just flinches back like, oh. And Buck's like, probably allergic, probably just in my head, he said, probably clear up my shift. And he tells Eddie he owes him $5 because Eddie told him $5 is cleared up by the next time we're on shift, and well, clearly it is not. And he's like, I don't believe in this curse, but like you should probably look into getting a dermatologist. And Eddie tells Buck he should look on the bright side, and Buck goes, what bright side? And he says that Buck won't need a Halloween mask this year. I'm like, Eddie, that's not helpful.
But yeah, maybe not helping the situation at all.
Right?
Especially knowing Buck. He spirals.
Yeah.
Yep. But that he does.
So then we go to, it's Halloween. The night's fallen. It's time for Crazy Town. A guy calls 911 over a small, burning bag of shit. And he wants the police to be sent, but Maddie's like, I can't just send the police over this. So the 118 shows up, puts out, no big deal. And he's like, didn't he say he was the vice principal? I thought he said he was vice.
Yeah, I think so.
So he says he's the vice principal and that the kids do this every year. I'm like, oh, dude, you are disliked in that high school. What the fuck did you do?
Right?
And he's clearly mad, and he obviously wants them to track down whoever this, but obviously the police have other things to be worried about that night. And so the guy calls back later and says his house was egged and that he's now following them. And it's the girls that were disturbing Athena's class, or Athena's session in class, and 911. And they're like, hey, this guy's chasing us. And they don't try and hide what they did. Like they were like, yeah, we egged his house, but now he's following us. I'm like, this guy is clearly gone off the rails. Like, hey man, stop chasing teenagers. It's not that serious. And then you just hear this crash, and then the call drops. And then the 118 gets there, and the trick-or-treater is pinned. And this is odd.
Oh,
I
this
didn't
is
realize it was
hard.
odd because Chim sees G and Mara, and then everyone starts putting together that Denny is the kid pinned by the car. And the vice principal, he's dead. And Denny's not in good shape. He's losing a lot of blood. There's a lot of internal bleeding. So Hen and he are a match, or not Hen and he, Karen and he are a match blood wise. So they started an infield transfusion. But they did lose him for a moment. They lost his pulse, and it was absolutely heart-wrenching. And I actually teared up over it, even though I had heard he got hurt, but I hadn't known how badly, and I was like, oh wow. So it was a tough scene. Fortunately, they brought him back, but that was really hard to watch for Hen and Karen. And
because they've gone through so much recently in in the series with losing Mara, or maybe not getting Mara. And then Denny's last season was all about his dad, and like they were worried that they were going to lose him to his dad. And yeah,
I honestly forgot about that whole storyline.
I'm like, hey, can we give them a break now? At least definitely give them a break as far as when it comes to like their kids, please. What the heck? But fortunately, they got him back, and then we get into the next scene, which is in the hospital. So Denny's surgery was a success, and Tommy's there, and he says how it's nice to have a crew like this even when things go wrong. Buck says, especially when things go wrong. And Buck suddenly has like this brain, like this bulb moment, and he's like, "Oh, now I know how to break the curse."
Also, like the
And
fact that he's sitting in the waiting room and he's got these boils all over his face, and like somebody was like, "Have you checked in?" And he's like, "Oh
it's
no,
like,
this is
this
just
is
my
just my
face."
face.
That was so funny.
And it's the fact that like when Tommy walks out, like, because he brought them coffee, and he walks out and he goes to sit next to Buck, and as he does, he's like, "Stop picking." And Buck had been picking at his boils, but then he stopped. He's like, "I wasn't." And then Eddie across from him goes, "Yeah, he was." Yes, you were. I'm like, oh my gosh, the energy between these three, I love it. And so Bobby sees the two girls who had egged the house show up. And Athena, of course, knew them from the school. So she goes, "You've got to be kidding me." And she goes to talk to them. They want to see if Denny was okay. And since he didn't get his candy, they brought him theirs. Um, and I thought that was sweet. Obviously, these kids felt guilty because ultimately their actions had led to this
Right.
all happening. They weren't like entirely at fault. Like obviously, the vice principal, had made a choice that he did not have to make, and that was the penultimate decision. But they had done like the catalyst. So they obviously felt guilty, and I was like, they're trying to make it up in the only way they knew how.
Yep.
And Athena does lecture them, on how something on Halloween, that didn't work out, but she thinks that they can do some good after all.
Right.
And so then we go to Heron and Ken talking. They're in Denny's hospital room. Denny's asleep or unconscious, I'm not sure which. And Hem feels bad and thinks that if she was there, this wouldn't have happened. And of course, there's no way of knowing. And Karen tells Hen, she tried to call her, and obviously Hen's feeling bad, but Karen's like, "I'm not trying to make you feel bad." But she gets the reason that she didn't answer the call was because she was answering another one.
Yeah.
And that ultimately all of that, like her being at work, meant that, yeah, she missed things, but she was there during the moment she was needed most, which was saving Denny.
Right.
Yeah. And you also don't know what could have happened. Like if she was there, she could have got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, you know what I mean? Like more than one
Or
person could have got hurt. It could have been worse.
maybe both of them would have gotten hurt or something like that. Like it could have
Right.
been, yeah, things could have been different. Things could have been different in good and bad ways. So it is what it is. You can't go back and change it. And fortunately, they still have Denny, and it worked out. So obviously, this is not going to be the last time they struggle with like this whole big moments issue.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
I was kind of glad to see Karen like able to relieve her of a little bit of like the guilt. Because obviously she like been pushing for her like to miss less moments. So it was good to see that. I love seeing my moms, do their stuff. They're
know.
great.
Like we just kind of said, this is something that parents all over worry about. Am I going to be home enough to be with my kids? Am I going to be working too much? Is the job that I have taking over my life? The good thing is they were, as firefighters, paramedics, they work like 2 days on, like sometimes 1 to 2 days off completely. So they're not working like 7 days a week straight. But I get where Karen was like, look, you're barely around for the kids. But there's like the small part of me that wants to say, Karen, if she'd have continued with medical school, you'd never see her.
Yeah, because she'd be a freaking doctor, and like, yeah,
They also have awful hours.
Right?
yeah,
Even worse.
especially like if she works in a hospital, like basically you're working every holiday. I do think it's nice, like in any job where if people have kids, like some people like don't have kids,
Yeah.
will like offer, like I know my mom had a friend that was like a nurse, and like she would always, like she didn't have any kids, so she would always like work on holidays so like people could be at home with their kids, and I think that's nice.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my plan for, when I eventually am in the fire department, because I'm not planning on having kids for a while, if ever. So like, hey, I can take people's shifts for all the moms and dads that wouldn't get to have that experience otherwise. So I think my mom also did that because she was in the police force before she had kids. She didn't have
Mhm.
any of us while she was still in there. So I think from what she said, I think she also did that. And it's a way to just pass some goodwill around. And occasionally have a favor to call in.
Right?
Yeah.
Um, so then we go to Buck talking to Billy Boyles. And I will say, a couple scenes during these couple episodes, like these two episodes, occasionally, I don't know, there was something about the way the lines were delivered where like I love Oliver's voice. I love listening to him talk. There was just something about the way the lines were delivered in this scene, which occasionally had me mute it and just read the text because I don't know, there was just something that didn't feel as genuine as his acting usually is, or maybe something just wasn't computing as much. And I found this not just with Oliver, but just kind of with a couple of scenes, just in general, in these
Mhm.
episodes, that I had to pause things and just read or mute it and then just read the text because something was not computing with how the act was
Right.
built. But for the most part, I was able to listen to it and experience this whole thing, and it's quite an experience. So he's talking to this gravestone, and he's like, he's been cursing his name since the day he learned it, and then he's like, well, to be fair, you cursed me first. Trying to take out my arm, which was a dick move. Now you have me looking like a leper and my own boyfriend. What have you been kissing me? He's just standing there beside them. They're both dressed up in suits, and he just looks at him like, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
And I'm just imagining there was probably like a scene where like he didn't kiss him for some other reason, and now Buck is like saying it's because
Right?
of the
Yeah.
curse or something.
Yeah, it reminds me of like those videos you see online of it being like something like, "Oh, my boyfriend said he doesn't love me anymore." And then it's like, "I didn't say that. I said blah 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 blah."
I'm not gonna buy you more books.
Yeah,
something, yeah.
that like literally that
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's like,
I'm saying we don't need another bag of cheese when we already have like something like
yeah,
that. She's like,
like
it's
that's what that
amazing.
gave. The energy that gave was literally those videos, and I love it.
I just feel like that is exactly what was happening because just Amis look up, well, now that's not true. Oh my gosh. And then Buck's like, see what you did. And Buck says, he has every reason to hate him right now, but the more he reads about Billy, the more he starts to wonder if maybe this wasn't so much a curse as it is a cry of help. He's like, well, you probably abandoned you when you needed them the most because he had been betrayed by his posse ultimately. And Buck can't imagine how scary that was because our people are what makes life worth living. You make memories with them, you share memories with them, they keep you on the right path. And we
Mhm.
see Chim and Maddie looking through pictures as Buck talks, and the dad and the daughters call, and Athena having, the girls sharing what happened on Halloween to educate the kids there at the high school and help them learn from their mistakes. And we also see Hen and Karen with the kids.
Right.
All amazing things. And Eddie is looking at a picture of him and Chris from Halloween, and this was from season 2. I was like, oh, the throwback.
Yeah.
Literally.
And Buck says how he can't imagine anything more painful than going through life alone.
Right.
Except maybe one thing, going through death alone. Billy's days bouncing around unknown and forgotten are over because Buck's in his posse now. And I will say, the camera work was very interesting in this scene because they did a lot of bouncing back and forth between Buck and Tommy. And this line in particular, I felt like really, at least really hit with how I understand Tommy's character. Tommy has been the guy that's been alone or forgotten or left behind in a lot of different things. Insecure, bouncing around. We've
Yeah.
seen that from what we know of his story, and now he obviously settled a bit before them, but now he's got Buck in his posse, so to speak.
Right.
Um, and I don't know. I thought there was definitely a metaphor that camera work was implying here. And I thought it was a very interesting choice. But Buck ultimately is, he tells him to finally rest easy and maybe lift the curse And he walks off, and then Tommy goes up and goes, "Please lift it."
Yeah, I was
That
like,
was
"Oh,
so
God, lift
funny.
it."
Cause like, please, dear God,
Like, I don't know how
He's
much
like,
longer I
"I
can handle this.
died."
let it
Yeah,
end.
it's good.
And then he just runs after it, Buck. And that was a really sweet end to the episode.
Mhm.
Honestly, it was a great episode. I really enjoyed
I liked
that
it.
particular
Like I
one.
liked how it wasn't like super Halloweeny, just because
Mhm.
like when you've had like multiple Halloween episodes, you don't really need something that's very Halloween because like
Right.
honestly, it kind of makes Halloween episodes kind of old if you're just gonna get like a like very Halloween all the time, which is why I kind of understand why shows like choose not to do certain themed episodes like
Mhm.
all every single year because it does kind of get old. Like they were
Mm.
able to add in new elements that still gave like the Halloween episode vibe, but it wasn't
Right.
necessarily like full Halloween. Like it was, but like they added different stuff in, which is very nice.
Yeah, no, it was nice to have the Halloween aspect, of course. I have missed them, but it is true. There's only so much you can do before it just starts getting boring and unoriginal.
Mhm.
So, it was great to have it back. And overall I just really liked this episode. Like
Right.
very few notes on it. I just found it a generally enjoyable one.
Mhm.
And I'm sure we'll talk more about that a bit later, but
Yeah, there's some, comedy in there, and with, you're right. Like with we don't want to continue to constantly have Halloween episodes, and sometimes it's like they kind of run together in a way because oftentimes the themes are similar. But I'm glad they kind of went with something different because we had a Halloween episode in season 2 and we haven't had one since. And I know we've all been asking for one. So I'm
3.
glad we finally got one.
mm,
That was the last one was in 3.
yeah.
Oh yeah, 3.
And we'd sort of, I guess we didn't have one in one, but we had the full moon one, which was close enough.
Yeah.
Like it was a bit spooky-ish, but it wasn't really
And the
Halloween.
Valentine's one was kind of spooky because you
Oh my,
had
I want another Valentine's one. I'm
I
just saying.
would. I know we just had oh I get the show's not back yet, but like literally Valentine's Day is literally just about to pass and I'm like, oh, I wish they would just air near it so that way we could get that.
Oh. Hey, I would even take a belated Valentine's Day. Like I'll take one in the spring. I don't care.
Right.
But from when we're recording this, Valentine's Day is tomorrow. And yeah, now I just have so many thoughts on all the things that could happen on another episode. So hopefully they bring that back in either this season or a future one. That would be great.
Mhm.
Um, so also I will say that this past episode, it was a book Tommy lover's dream, but it was also like either a buddy Tommy lover or like just platonic buddy Tommy lover dream
Mhm.
because like the interactions in there were on point. We saw
Right.
like the relationship grow. We saw their friendship at peak. Like it was just knocking out of the ballpark on those respects. Yeah. So just wanted to add that. And then we're going into the next one. So this is 806 and this this open I did not expect this opening. What the
That was so like when you realize what happening, it was kind of like funny in a weird way.
Yeah.
There's this 911 call of a man saying that his mom has been taken by his wife. So we're thinking like, okay, elder abduction, the wife's gone psycho. What?
All right.
Um, and nope, it's an urn. And the wife took it, and apparently it's what sounds like the husband had like built a shrine to his mother and like torn apart like her crafting corner for it or something. There's clearly so much wrong with this couple. Not
Yeah.
problems that dropping the urn or stealing it could solve for sure. And she's threatening to throw it, but she drops it and herself by accident because she was kind of being talked off the ledge by Athena, literally and figuratively speaking. And then she trips and falls. But they both fall in the I forget what it's
Airbag.
called. The thing. Yeah, that's close enough. Airbag. And the guy was like gloating that, the urn apparently was worth a lot of money, and he had put his mom in there so that, the wife wouldn't touch it, but now the divorce settlement is gonna go through and she's not gonna get any of the money. And then he trips and falls and breaks the
And this is when you're like, yeah, that's like, you never want to gloat about things like that because then it never goes in your favor.
Right?
Also, karma. The guy was being a dick. She also was not being great. Like, it was just toxic all around. But
Yeah, they both had their faults.
yeah, that clearly was a falling apart relationship before that entered into play. So yeah, well, that was certainly a beginning. And then we go to Eddie at confession. I'm like,
These
okay.
are my confessions, little Usher.
Good. Oh, so Eddie's talking about how he lost his son, and the priest is like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and Eddie's like, "Well, he isn't dead. He just lives with his grandparents in Texas." I'm like, and you got to work on how you phrase that. Like, I know it feels
Yes.
like
That's
you lost him,
literally
but also it sounds like
everybody.
he's dead.
It's a way, like I can totally support like things like that, just being that I understand they are trying to make it dramatic, and I will take just
Right.
a small dramatic moment like this, but I'm just like,
Eddie is our drama
words.
queen. I will just say he is our
I
drama
mean,
queen.
who
We all
isn't?
know. He
Who
is our
isn't?
telenovela prince.
He
Did
does
he
watch
watch
those.
them with Abuela?
Chris and
Absolutely
him were
watched
watching
them.
them.
Uh-huh, yeah. um, and so he says, how he tried to protect Chris, but he wound up traumatizing him instead. And the priest, asks how, and he's like, it's hard to explain. And the priest says, there's nothing he hasn't heard. And I'm like, oh, well, you definitely haven't heard this one. And he says how,
Yeah.
he came home and found him with his dead mother. And you just see the priest's face go, huh?
Yeah,
Come
he
again?
needs to work on his phrasing.
Yeah, again, that just sounds necrophilic.
Yeah, I was like, that's
Just a bit.
Also, the way he phrases it makes it sound like he caught them in the middle of sex or something.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's not what happened. Obviously, it was still traumatizing regardless, but there was not shenanigans happening.
Right.
There was just what the fuck happened.
Mm-hmm.
The embodiment of WTF.
Yeah.
And then, Eddie then explains that it wasn't exactly his mom, it just looked exactly like her. And the priest tells him to go do a few Hail Marys, and that's it. And he's like, "That's it."
Right.
And the priest is kind of like, "Well, the rest can't come from you." I forget exactly how he said it, but he's like, "There's only so much I can do in this
Right.
thing. Like, I can't
Right.
absolve you just like that. The rest between you and God."
Right. Yeah, because he's mostly there to like listen.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like, Eddie, you need to go to therapy if you want like
Go
something
back to
else.
Frank.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Frank means your business.
I know that we're following a storyline of Eddie and his faith and religion and all that, but I would have rather these scenes with the priest be replaced by scenes with Frank.
Agreed. Because he has a lot to
Personally,
work through. Like,
he has a lot to work on.
as
There's a
he
lot.
has from it, yeah, like he should be continuing working through things because you're
Yeah.
never really done. Like, yes, for some
Yeah.
people, there is that point where you get to the point where it's like, oh, I don't need to go to therapy anymore. But then there's like people that like, not like, yeah, you do need to continue to go and you might ever like never stop. But like, and Eddie's one of those people. I feel like he still has lots to work to do, and like he just has a lot to figure out.
He does, and I speaking as someone who's probably in therapy for the rest of my life. Like there's even when you work through initial stuff, like you rake over one crap pile, you find another one underneath. You rake over that
Right.
crap pile,
Right.
you find one buried 6 feet under. Like it's a lot. And so you don't stop just because what was impacting you to the point of not being able to function is somewhat shifted through. You got to keep going, or else you're going to keep winding up in these situations. And
Right.
so, like, listen, church is all well and good, but unless Jesus descended himself and counseled you, it's not going to take place of therapy. I'm sorry. You need to go back to Frank. Absolutely, if he wants to pursue like resolving his relationship with his religion and all that, he can absolutely do that at the same time. But he needs to go to Frank. So
I agree. And I go to church and we talk about it a lot. Me and some friends were like, the church does not have, like, most priests and people who are in counsel, no one has a mental health degree.
Yeah.
They're not qualified. Yeah, they're qualified to sit and listen to you vent and etc. But they're not there to help diagnose you with a mental illness or treat your depression or situation. And so
they can't prescribe you shit if
exactly
you need it, or yeah.
And for some people, it's like, you gotta remember that, like, unless they've got a PhD and like a psychiatry degree, I'm not gonna go to them for advice on that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
No. So it's all well and good, but again, like I would much rather prefer those be different.
Yeah. Plus,
so then
Frank
we go
needs to
in.
come back.
Yeah, where's Frank? Like, come on, I miss him.
Maybe he took a sabbatical because of the 118.
He's like,
They couldn't
I've
deal with
had
it.
enough in this 118. This one's doing this one's doing that. I've had
He
enough.
transferred across the country. Wouldn't it be funny if in the spin-off he just showed up because he moved to a different city?
That would be hilarious. Like, I would honestly die.
I think that would automatically become my favorite 911 series. And I say this as someone whose favorite is the original. Even with my love for Lone Star, still I love original just a little bit more. I think automatically if they took that storyline, nope, it's with a new one. I don't care that we're 2 seconds into the first episode and there's nothing else to base that on. And Frank's oh, okay. So moving on from the confessional booth for now. We have Maddie and Chim. And so G, finally fell asleep. Chim says how he doesn't get why she doesn't want to go to bed. And Maddie's like, well, what kid doesn't? Like, what kid does want to go to bed? Did you want to go to bed? And I was like, oh, probably not. And Maddie says how she thinks that G misses Mara. And Chim's like, well, they see each other all the time. And Maddie's like, yeah, but it's not the same. She lived here for 3 months, and that's a long time for G. I'm like, you know what? That's fair. 3 months is a lot of time. In the span of, what she's been, how old is she? 3, 4? Like that's a lot of time. You've only experienced so many months at that point, and even less that you can remember.
Right.
So Maddie thinks, maybe she liked having a sister, and Chim says how that reminds him that they need to get that bed out of there, and Maddie's like, or we could fill it. And Chim's like, well, what do you mean? And Maddie's like, I don't know. I just think maybe having another kid around was good for G, and maybe they should think about giving G a brother or a sister. And Chim's surprised and maybe a bit alarmed by this, and is like to Maddie, you want to have another baby? And Maddie's like, oh, it's just something to think about. I think we've been talking about this for a while, on whether or not they were going to have another kid. So it is interesting to see this get brought up. And obviously the concerns that come along with it after what happened the first time, which they definitely do dive into in this episode. I'm glad they did not put those conversations off.
Yes, I'm so glad it was brought up.
Yeah.
So then we go to Buck Tommy out at dinner. And Buck is telling Tommy to not dare Payne. And Tommy's like, oh, come on, you paid for takeout last night. And Buck's saying, how tonight is special. And asks Tommy if he knows why. And Tommy pulls out a box saying how he's going to guess it's their 6-month anniversary. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're already here, I guess. And Buck's like, well, I didn't get you anything. And Tommy said, but you're buying dinner. And Buck opens the box and there are Lakers tickets in the box. And Tommy's like, you don't even have to take me, take Eddie if you want. And Buck's like, really? And Tommy's like, or die. And I was like, okay.
Or die.
He delivers his humor with such deadpan like face. Like he delivers it so well. And that just seems to be a thing with Lou in general, and I appreciate it. I'm like, okay. I like that. I get it. I get it. It's rubs some people wrong occasionally, but like, no, it's my type of humor. I love it.
Right.
So then, this girl comes up and asks Buck to take a picture for her and her friends. And Buck's like, kind of, it's being a little weird. And he grabs his phone and she wants him to take it on hers unless he's trying to get her number. Buck's kind of flustered. He's like, that wasn't his intention. And Buck takes some photos and he goes back to Tommy and says how weird, that was weird. And Tommy says, that wasn't. And he's like, Buck's hot, so is she, and it's okay to look. And Buck, thinks, Tommy looked too. And Tommy makes a comment of how he is a Kinsey 6, which is the Kinsey scale is a research tool that describes sexual orientation, kind of to like different degrees. Like you lean one in, like you're Kinsey 6, you are gay. Like you like the same gender, or you are fully into men or women if you're Kinsey 6, or you're Kinsey 1, which means you have a slight. You're slightly bent, not fully bent. So, that's okay. So cool. Kinsey 6, that definitely we did not, I think, hear him flat out say he was gay before this point, I think.
Mhm.
So, cool.
Yeah,
We got
I think
that.
there was an assumption
Yeah.
that he was gay and
Definitely
not bi, but like, yeah, this is like the first moment where he flat out was like, I'm gay.
Which, you know what? Yippee. There we go.
Right. Confirmation.
And Buck goes, what does that mean? Which, listen, I'm saving most of my thoughts for this until after I finish talking about the scene, but you're telling me that Buck figured out his identity, or at least realized he was queer, and didn't immediately research the fuck out of this?
Yeah, it's not Buck to do that. Like, it's Buck to do that. Like,
he would be the one telling Tommy what Kinsey scale is. I'm sorry.
Right?
So
I sort of see it, but I'm also like, really, Buck? But I'm also like, I kind of see it of him being like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
depends on
know.
what rabbit hole I guess he goes down.
He
Yeah.
probably
I
pulled
mean,
up the BuzzFeed quiz of "Am I gay?" Like
I
the
mean,
one you
we
see in
haven't.
so many things.
I don't think he himself has even described himself with a label yet, which is absolutely valid. You do not need to put a label to yourself,
Right.
but even he himself. So I don't know. I just find it a
Yeah.
little bit. I have comments about this entire scene, but I will keep them until we finish talking about this scene. And Tommy's, he says he's gay. Buck is like, well, have you ever? And Tommy's like, tried with a woman? Oh yeah. And Tommy says how he was almost married to one. He explains they were engaged for 2 years until he called it off, which was probably the only honest thing he did in that entire relationship. And Buck's like, wow. And Tommy says, we heard she went a little nuts after that, and goes on to say that she took up some himbo half her age.
Oh.
And Buck's like, oh, well, she's probably just using him to get you out of her system. And Tommy's like, well, he hope it worked for her after what he put her through. And then he says Abby deserved better.
I'm like, excuse me?
The moment,
excuse me? And when I first saw
the moment that
this,
blew up the internet.
Oh, yeah.
My thought was, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? This is like straight out of fanfic.
Right?
It is. It is. This is one of the most out there theories that has ever come up, and they made it an actual thing.
Yeah, and my thing with it is just saying very little before we finish the scene is it is like straight out of fan fiction, and fans were literally like being like, because Abby had an ex named Tommy, it was mentioned, and everyone, once we saw Tommy in last season when he came back, people were like, oh my god, I bet Abby dated Tommy, like this Tommy. And I'm like, guys, this is a little out there.
Right.
It is
Like
out
that
there.
just seems like something you'd read in fanfic and you'd be like,
Like,
okay.
oh my god, there aren't
Yeah.
allowed to be multiple people named Tommy in the Los Angeles area.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just hate
So
that.
there was definitely that group that was like, I'm like, they were right. What? Because like we speculated,
I hate
everybody had their own thoughts, and of course you go back, and we had no time frame of like how long they'd been dating. we didn't know a lot about Tommy from Abby, so it was just yeah.
We just knew he was the ex that I think her mom really liked or whatever, but like that was I forget exactly. It's been so long since I watched season one, but
Yeah,
yeah, no,
same.
I'm just saying that until they validated it in this scene, there was absolutely no proof and nothing to say that that was an actual thing, except for the fact that they happen to share the same name. Which, I don't know. I'm not as mad as it as a lot of people are, but I still am not happy with it.
Yeah.
But we'll get more
Agreed.
into that.
Right.
Um, and Buck's like, Abby, because he's clearly putting pieces together.
Oh
And
yeah.
Tommy says, Abby Clark, she used to work 911 Dispatch where your sister is now. And he goes, amazing. Which, okay, just gotta say, Abby did have amazing hair.
She did.
And then Buck is totally spiraling, and
Same, Buck. Same.
I have a lot of issues with this scene. It was just an odd scene. Partially also, first of all, it's their 6-month anniversary. I don't feel like it's very like Buck at all to not get a significant other a gift for their anniversary, and then Buck got basketball tickets, which he's not really a fan of basketball. I don't know. I feel like even going to a Lakers game is probably still a fun experience. I know nothing about basketball, but I'd probably leap on the experience because it's a Lakers game. But it's still like, oh, okay.
I feel like I don't know, like sporting events, like I'm not into sports at all, but like sporting events are fun to go to. I don't know how to explain it. Like they're fun to go to, like even if you know nothing, because it's just fun. Like the atmosphere is fun and like that kind of stuff. So I kind of understand that in a sense.
I mean, going to a sporting event, it's almost like a cultural thing, and it's
Yeah.
a social activity that is separate from just being a sport, which is yeah, sort of what you're saying. So I don't know, like it's not. I don't know. Maybe there could be behind the scenes contact that could be added in later. That's like okay, that's not an odd gift, but it's like okay, Buck didn't give Tommy anything, and then Tommy gave him Lakers tickets. Okay. Interesting. Right. And then there was that whole scene with the girl, which I just hated. I'm sorry. Buck, you're not that oblivious. You know women very well. You have dated quite a few of them. You're not oblivious. She clearly was flirting with you. She was clearly, and like to his credit, he didn't really do anything wrong, but he could have easily been like, I'm sorry, I'm on a date with my boyfriend, maybe ask a waiter.
Yeah.
Like there was no establishing that he was taken. There was no like, and I feel like this is not an uncommon thing. Like, lesbians get mistaken for sisters all the time. And guys are just, oh, bros. Oh, wow, they kissed. They're really good bros.
Yeah.
People will do anything to ignore what's in front of their face. I'm just
Yeah. Like I don't know. It was weird. I don't know. I think it was very awkward just in the fact that like I think Buck felt a little awkward and then it was like, oh, but like I'm here with my boyfriend and it was just very awkward and I think he was trying to like not he was trying to in a sense be like respectful, but then like he was looking, but it's like, dude, you do have eyes. Like it's fine to look. It's not like you're acting on it. And then like I think he was sort of trying to be respectful to Tommy in the sense that like she was totally flirting with him, and then he's like, oh, but that's not my intention. Like, no, that's not it. But it was such a weird scene. Like I liked the scene minus like a few parts. It was just very like weird, and I know they were trying to like set things up and like imply a few things and just like be like make us think certain things, but like some parts of it were a little weird where I'm just like, okay.
It's also a weird like 180 from some things in last episode too. So it's like I don't know. It's to some degree it just didn't feel like they knew at all what they were wanting to do. So I don't know. Like Tommy was generally fine with it. And I think like he's not easily made insecure by anyone other than himself.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you know what? They're adults. That is up to them to figure out, what their boundaries are as far as that goes. And, at least, people have eyes. But I don't know. Again, what I said about the Kinsey scale thing stands. It still feels weird that like Buck hadn't done research, but that's just me. Um, and then the whole Abby thing,
Yeah, I was mad
I'm
about
not here
that.
for.
I was
Mm-mm.
mad about that. I forget my actual reaction when it first happened, but I was mad about it because I'm like, this is such a freaking cliche because it's like so just like generic in a sense because it's like, and also it confuses me. Like, I understand the Begins episodes were like years prior, but even
Right.
then it confuses me because just different things, and I'm just like, I honestly timelines in the show um are very like the writers are not very good at math because some things
No,
do
that's
not add up.
no, I do not.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there are a lot of ways they could have led up to what they were originally leading up to, which I will get into that. But there are a million ways they could have led up to that, and it didn't have to be this. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what were they smoke? I'm sorry, what were you smoking? What were you consuming in the writer's room? What the fuck was happening?
Yeah,
Um,
it definitely seemed very out of left field.
Yeah, I mean, I
also,
understand they were trying to set certain things up, so they definitely had a goal and intention. So I don't know, but yeah, it was kind of like, okay, what's going on?
yeah. And then I have an overwhelming comment, but I will say it later because I think once we tackle a few more scenes in here, like it'd be better time. So we go to Maddie. So we go to Buck talking to Maddie, which of course he does. As you do. And Maddie's like, "Wow, what are the odds?" And Buck's like 1,000,000 to 1, which like, yeah, what are the fucking odds, Fox? Not
Right?
Fox, ABC. It's ABC. Um, what are the fuck? Anyhow, Maddie's like, well, that's crazy. And then she makes a comment, which I would like to say, what the fuck? She
Yeah.
made a comment of how many men she turned gay,
Oh.
and no, stop right there. That is not an acceptable comment.
Yeah, and she's like, I'm kidding, and I'm like, nobody thinks that's funny.
Nobody thinks that's funny. Queer people don't think that's funny. Hi, I'm a queer person. That is a really poor taste.
Right.
I
That's
don't
not how that
like
works.
that at all. Just but not even because it's gross and it's like that's not a thing, but it's just like they make that comment in a ton of movies, a ton of shows. Like it happens so much in media, and I'm just like, it's so
And
unnecessary.
it's also derogatory
Yeah,
towards the
that
Yeah.
woman
too.
for sure because it's like, oh,
Right.
she's so loathsome that she
Mm-hmm.
turned men off women completely. Like, what a concept. Also, that's not how that works. I'm sorry. You
Right.
don't
Yeah.
start dating people of the opposite sex or people of the same sex unless you already had that inclination or found that inclination later. It doesn't develop because of a particular partner. That is a
Mm-hmm.
queerphobic thing to think.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm very mad at it. And it's Maddie, which
Yeah.
like I'm sorry, one of our best friends is Josh, who is a gay man. I'm like, that's very out of left field for Maddie. I feel like that was very out of character.
Yeah.
So not like obviously she doesn't like Abby. She's never liked Abby, so I'm not surprised that maybe like a little
Honestly, none
disdain
of
came
us really
through
liked
there.
her. So
No.
valid,
But
but
like
like even so.
But
a lot
still,
of
to
other
use a phrase like that,
yeah.
a little
There are a
out.
lot of
It's
other
gross.
things there are a lot of other things she could have said that would not have been like queerphobic or even like vaguely misogynistic. Let's be real, because that is a kind of anti-woman sentiment as well. There are a lot of things she could have said about Abby. That's not that. Like, listen, I have some choice words about Abby too, but
Right.
not along these lines. So
Yeah,
yeah, we're all
agreed.
we're all on the same page. That was a terrible comment. And general advice for anyone listening: never say that shit. Don't ever say that. But yeah, again, as you said, common thing in media. Oh, it's annoying. Yeah, and also, yeah, Buck is bi too. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
let's not be biphobic here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Bi
that
erasure
was
is a
not it.
real thing that is prevalent in media, and we're not going through this rabbit hole again. Okay. Okay. So yeah, obviously we don't know that bisexual is a term that he uses. I know that that's what Oliver is identified with, but he clearly liked women. He clearly still likes women. He also
Mhm.
just also likes men.
Right.
That is at least multisexual, so we will roll with bisexual. Anyhow, so even I will say at least they did have Buck chime in with, well, Tommy was already gay.
Yeah.
Like, he has been gay this entire time.
Yeah.
And he was with her for years before he ever kissed a boy. And like, I don't think he was talking about Tommy. I think he was talking about himself in that. Like, he had
Yeah,
been
he
with
was.
Abby years. Yeah, yeah. Just the way the sentence came out just now is like, oh, just to clarify, he was like, Tommy was already gay, and then Buck himself had been with her years before. So then Josh comes in, he's like, I'm totally not used to I'm like, Josh, you are
Josh, you
mysterious.
totally are.
And it's okay. You
And
can.
he's like, who kissed a boy? And Maddie's like, Buck. And Josh is like, Tommy? Unless there's another boy. He's here for the tea. I'm all for this.
Yeah,
And
I get it.
Buck's like, there's not. And Maddie's like, now there's another woman. I'm just like, Maddie, you're not helping. I'm sorry. And Josh is like, wait, what? And Maddie says how Buck slept with Tommy's fiance.
Maybe not in those words, maybe.
Right?
I will say I'm not loving the role that Maddie took up in this conversation, just overall. But sure, there were some funny bits like that. And then Buck's like, no, and says how she was not his fiance when Buck slept with her, and he didn't sleep with her. He was in a relationship with her. And how Maddie makes it sound so sordid. And like, yeah, a little bit. And I was like, Buck makes it sound sordid. She doesn't think it's a big deal. Okay, moving on. I'm just in pain in this entire situation. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And then Josh
Yeah.
is like, Tommy was engaged to a woman, and I was like, Abby Clark. And Josh is like, what? And Josh goes, Abby's Tommy is your Tommy? And Buck's like, yeah. And he's like, you must have met him back then. And Josh says, no, Abby wasn't one to bring her business to work, unlike some other people, and looks at Maddie. And I'm
That was
like,
funny.
That was good.
that was great. And then Josh says, she was very devastated when he broke things off with her. And Buck's like, see, this is not a joke. He led her on, said he loved her, and then he hurt her. And Maddie's like, and you're afraid he might do that to you? Buck's like, I thought I knew him, and he didn't think he was capable of being dishonest or cruel. And I will say more after this next bit. So Josh asks if Buck loves him, and Buck's like, do I? Like, clearly he doesn't have to answer that even. And then Josh is like, okay, forget that word. We don't need to go that far. I'm like, fair enough. You don't need to say that before you're ready.
Right.
And asks if Buck cares for Tommy. Buck's like, yeah, of course. Josh says you're romantically inclined towards this person. Buck's like, that's obvious. And he asks if Buck thinks about him when he's not around. Buck's like, yeah. And Josh is asking all these things, asks if Buck sees a future with Tommy, and Buck's like, yeah, he could. And mine personally, like, well, that sounds like it's heading towards love to me if it's not already there, but
Right.
all right. And Josh says, Buck needs to stop judging him because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And Josh breaks it down for Buck, saying that there's a pre-Glee world and a post-Glee world. I'm like, okay, of course it's bringing up Glee.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I could do an entire thesis on that statement alone.
I liked that analogy though, because
Yes.
and Josh even explains it, and because Buck's like, I've never watched Glee, and Josh is like, well, you don't need to watch it to benefit from it. Like, and like that analogy was perfect because even if you've never seen it, everyone at least knows just like a little bit about it. So that way, it's a good analogy that anybody can get, which I liked that they brought this in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. I don't remember why, but like I think this whole analogy was like ripped to shreds online, and I don't
Yeah.
remember why, but I'm like, I don't think there's anything necessarily. I might have a few critiques here and there, but I think overall what Josh was communicating is very true. So he goes on to say, Josh sets out him and Tommy lived in the pre-Glee world. It was scarier and it was more confusing then and not half as accepting. And sometimes they did things to protect themselves. They did things that they might not be proud of. That in post-Glee world look less than noble, but you don't judge the people who came before you, the ones that fought battles you didn't have to because they have scars. You honor their scars and you thank them. And I will say that throughout this entire like monologue, I was thinking about just the amount of hate Tommy's gotten ever since he came back. Um and all the people that are so quick to assume certain things, the honestly homophobic things that have come out in relation to Tommy. Um where yes, Tommy made mistakes, but he did it because it was a scarier world. It was not a safe world. Um and even now it's not perfect. It's getting
Right.
more and more
Mhm.
scary to exist as a queer person right now.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not necessarily reflecting in this part of the show at this time,
Mhm.
but it is still like, hey, it's still not ideal, but it's still a lot better than it once was.
Yeah.
And also like talking, it's important to acknowledge the impact that the older queer people have had on this generation, especially since there are so few of them because of the AIDS crisis. There is a reason that you're like, oh yeah, all queer people are so young. Yeah, it's because most of the older ones are dead. The
Sad
AIDS
statistic, but it's true.
the AIDS crisis wiped out a whole generation, not in totality, but in majority. And there's
Yeah.
still major stigmatism that comes from that. And it's like, hey, queer people have existed for all of time. It's just, hey, they are currently 6 feet under. So they don't have a voice to speak up for themselves, except for the few that are still around there.
Yeah.
And obviously that's still like the height of that crisis was like a generation or so before what Josh is saying about him and Tom in particular, but it's not as far
Mhm.
back as you think it is.
Right.
And there are still a lot of survivors, still a lot of people impacted by that. Sorry, that's my tangent, but I was just like, hey, this is really important. And not only do straight people need to know this, because hey, that's important history that should not get lost, but younger queer people need to know this as well.
Mhm.
Because hey, there were a lot of battles fought for us to be where we are now, and not all of them were Stonewall or specific other places like that. So that is my little tangent right there. But
Yeah.
I, for the most part, like this because it is important. Yeah, Tommy did not great things, but there are a lot of people that were in lavender marriages, whether both parties were aware of them or not, that were there just simply to protect themselves. And honestly, Tommy did do a favor by breaking it off.
Yeah.
But he is certainly not the only one to have ever been in this circumstance. There are tons of people throughout history that did this exact same thing and kept it going further. Uh, Anyhow, that is my ramble.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Buck, I think, learned an important lesson here.
Yeah. And I'm really glad they brought up, I mean, just creator of 911 is Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, who were two of the co-creators of Glee with Ian Brennan. So just that, the nod to Glee. But also, yes, Glee had gay characters on there, characters of other members of the LGBT community. And it was like bringing a lot of that to like mainstream media that hadn't in the past. We had Ellen's show. She had a sitcom and then her daytime talk show. And then there was like Will and Grace for a long time.
Right.
There wasn't a lot. So yeah, there was a lot of hiding and Tommy had to do that. And then Glee came out and like, so yeah, Buck now as an adult kind of finding himself and coming out, it's not as scary for him because it's more accepted than it was even 10, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially like when I think about it, I think when I was in high school, so this is like the mid 2010s. So like I graduated in 2014. So I was like in high school in like 29, 2010, like when I started high school. And just thinking about how different it was then to now. Like
Mhm.
now, if you were going to high school, how different it would be. I just remember certain things would happen and like how kids were
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like thinking about that too.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, this was the 2000s. It was a lot more progressive. Hey, gay marriage was not legalized in the US until 2015, which
Right.
is actually years behind a lot of countries. I believe the Netherlands was the first official one to legalize it.
Oh, I thought
Um,
Denmark, but somewhere in Europe was, yeah.
I think it was Netherlands first, but Denmark definitely followed pretty
Hmm.
quick. That's just in my memory, but a lot of countries did
Yeah.
it before the US did. And you might not think 20 years does a lot of difference. 20 years makes a ton of difference. And even just the amount of queer media we have now, like we're still fighting for representation in media as it is and like accurate representation. But
Right.
and I say this as someone who is very aware that I will never realize how privileged I am with what I have now compared to 20 years ago.
Mm.
Um, and I have also never seen it. But and I've never thought of it as necessarily the turning point, but I know of several things that were that, and like creators like Ryan Murphy, and because Ryan Murphy is also gay himself, like he has a husband. Um, like they a lot of um pioneers for queer media.
Yeah.
Um, that really started this far. But I'm just saying it was an imperfect world with a lot of imperfect people. It still is, but we cannot talk about history that we did not know. And there are a lot of early 20s people spouting off about shit they don't have a clue about. So I'm just
Right.
gonna say some people need to check their privilege
Yeah.
um, on what we are privileged enough to get as our generation of
Yeah.
queer people.
Well, and you think 20 years there is a big thing. I mean, that's the difference between, being able to marry your significant other and having the medical ability to be their power of attorney when their health, something happens to them. Like,
Being able to adopt kids together.
yeah. So, yeah.
A lot of stuff. Yeah. So this was definitely important, and I really wish more people internalized the message that it had. Whether or not you agree that Glee was the right one to use it, I
Yeah.
know a lot of people threw a fit on that. I don't
Yeah.
care. I don't have an opinion as far as that goes. It's still an important message to take out of it. I think some people
Yeah.
need to revisit that.
I'm just, for those of you guys that were complaining, if you just think about it as it was mentioned because of the creators of both series, just leave it at that. You don't have to like agree with the like Glee part of it. I think it was more put in there because of Ryan Murphy.
Especially if it was a series that did do some pioneering as far as that works, which it sounds like it did. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
fair enough.
I feel like people just like to complain about it even being mentioned. So I think maybe that's probably why I honestly had no idea people were complaining about that. I mean, people were complaining at this time of the
People complain about
show.
everything in
People
this
were
show.
complaining about, honestly, I think um like people were complaining a lot about Tommy. Like he could literally breathe on screen and people complain about it. So it's just like it's kind of one
I
of those
mean,
things that when people are complaining about certain things about the show, whether if it's a show or another show, I kind of just tune it out because honestly, it really doesn't matter. Like if I'm fine with it, who the hell cares? It's kind of my mood. I have so many opinions on that, and I'll probably share them later. But
oh, me too.
Yeah, I have my own opinions
I
on Glee, but I can talk facts. I'd rather do that than talk
yeah,
Glee because
it was a good analogy, and
Absolutely.
that's what it was
It was a
supposed
good
to be.
analogy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's move on, else we're gonna be here all day
please
because I
do.
know
Yeah.
I definitely have more stuff that I will talk
Oh,
about. But we all have some things to do. All right, so moving on. So Maddie and Chip. They're in bed together. Maddie can't sleep. It's clear Chimney's tossing. And Maddie asks Chim if he wants her to read him a bedtime story, because he hasn't fallen asleep yet. And then she turns on the light and asks what's wrong. And Jim asks her how she can just drop the bomb of let's have a baby when it almost killed her the last. And I'm like, oh, good. We're tackling this directly. Yippee.
Good. Yeah.
We are heading straight into this. And Maddie's like, so that's why you're not sleeping. And Chim's like, yeah. It's like, how it came out of nowhere. And Maddie says, it didn't come out of nowhere. And she saw G and Mara together and just got her thinking. And Chim's like, well, what's wrong with adopting? And Maddie's like, nothing. And she thinks, that maybe that's what they should do. But she also loves looking at G and seeing themselves in her. And she would love an adopted child, but she doesn't know that that's their only option.
Mm-hmm.
And Chim says how he's afraid, and she knows that. And I do love that they did bring up adoption and didn't immediately dismiss it. That was one of the things I loved most in this conversation, even though I kind of love everything about this conversation. But I also love that. Like, it wasn't discarded, it's an option, but like, so continuing on, Maddie's like, it's not like she's the first woman to experience postpartum depression. She's pretty sure her mom is still going through it. And Chim just doesn't know if it's worth the risk. And Maddie asked him if it was worth it last time. And Chim's like, well, that's not fair because he can't imagine his life without G in it. But he also can't imagine it without Maddie. And Maddie's like, well, we don't need to decide all this right now. So then we go to Eddie at a juice bar. And he's going to buy a juice. And then he changes his mind and takes a water instead. And the priest is right behind him in line, is watching him. And it's a little weird. I have feelings on this whole attraction. But okay, so Eddie doesn't know it's the priest. He didn't really see him all that well through the confessional booth, I guess. Or I guess he didn't really look all that much. And then he sits down with him. So the priest sits down with him. I think his name's Brian, Father Brian, or something like that. And he starts making weird small talk, saying about like how he never stops here but was compelled to do so. And he asks Eddie if he comes here often. And Eddie looks at him and is like, listen, no offense, I'm straight. And he said that he's looking dead into the camera. I'm like, listen, okay.
I'm like, what are they trying to tell us? Because it's just kind of like one of those things where I feel like they were just like, okay, well, we need to prove this point one more time. And just be like, listen, Eddie's straight. And I'm like, y'all can literally throw a rock at the screen and scream it, and I still wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
I know
that was
I mean,
and then the priest says, well, and she's like, oh, that's okay, I'm celibate. And then you just see Eddie like kind of blink, like, what? I don't know. I'm even as someone who has headcanoned or thought seeing glimpses of queerness at the very least in Eddie, after all the drama that has happened, can't say I'm necessarily mad at them establishing strongly that he's straight. I can still make him gay in my headcanon. I don't care. But at this point, as far as the show goes, I am okay with him. I don't know. It's such a mess at this point.
Yeah.
But I will say I'm not as mad as it or as disbelieving of it as I would have once been. And maybe that's just because I am so tired of the drama.
Honestly, that. But also I know that like Eddie not being straight was brought up and Bryant wasn't like into the storyline, so maybe that's also why. We really don't know.
Yeah.
And stuff.
I mean, I know people saw this scene and they were like, "Oh, that's proof that they're gonna go through a sexuality arc with."
Oh my god, people literally still to this day are online are talking about like how, oh my god, this is proof that Puck and Eddie get together, and I'm like, guys, we are so far off.
Oh man.
And
yeah, I have my thoughts on that.
Even if there is, it's like I for the longest time we didn't even know the priest's first name. We just called him the hot priest. So like, so I mean, really, like, yes, they had Eddie make a comment. How many other men who are questioning themselves have clicked, oh no, I'm this, because that's what they're raised to say, and this is, they're having a
Right.
conversation with a priest, which we all know that he was raised
Mhm.
Catholic. A lot of guilt there. He's even said he has it. So of course that would be his natural response. Just let the
Hmm.
show play out the storyline wherever it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely it was kind of it was a little funny, I'll be real. And the priest's response was very funny. And then he
Yeah.
introduced himself. He says he's Father Brian. And he's like, "Oh, you're Eddie." And then he questions why Eddie changed his mind about the juice and why he brought the water instead. And Eddie is like, "Because I wanted water." And the priest's like, "Well, it's because you aren't allowing yourself to have joy." And then he's telling Eddie how he must have loving parents take his son in, and Eddie's like, "Oh, they're too willing." And then he tells Eddie how his job must be rewarding, and then he says, "And you have that good mustache." And then he explains why he grew it, and he says how the LAFD doesn't allow beards because they're too flammable. Otherwise, he would have gone full mountain man. And the priest is like, "So it's a disguise." And then he says something like that. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, fair enough." Eddie is afraid of seeing a failure when he looks in the mirror, a man who doesn't deserve forgiveness or joy. He says to, and Brian says to Eddie, that's not what God wants for Eddie. Eddie's been forgiven, and Eddie says he thinks he doesn't deserve to be. And he tells Eddie, you need to earn it. And he tells Eddie what the little he knows about him. He knows Eddie is a man who worked in service, and you can't take care of others unless you take care of yourself. And that's obviously something they both know. I think it's actually talking over the conversation that actually makes me like it a little bit more. Maybe I found it maybe a little odd that they'd only really met each other in the confessional, and then he approached him outside. That kind of almost felt like a breach, but I do
Yeah.
think it was
Mhm.
good ultimately. I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like
It
this
is
is also
weird.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a little weird. Plus,
It was,
maybe
yeah.
it felt like a lot all at once. If that
You
makes any
know-
sense.
Agreed. It kind
When
of
you
like
don't know each
reminds
other
me
that well.
like if you were to see your therapist out in the wild and you like you can
Yeah.
approach them, but you
Yeah.
you can only do
Yeah.
like certain like they can't be like, oh, like how they know you or anything like that, but you could talk to them and
Right.
approach them, but like that they can't approach you basically.
Yeah. That
That's
happened to
kind
me.
of what it reminds me of.
Yeah. I had that situation. Like my psychologist that I was seeing for some time happened to shop in the same store that I was working in the deli in. And he shopped in the deli and he said, he specifically asked me, he's like, "Do I have your permission if I see you to say hi to you?" Because, a lot of people just totally turn the other way because they don't want to admit that they're seeing a psychologist. And I was like, "I don't mind if you come up and say hi to me." And if, and then I asked him the same thing because I'm like, you know, we can be social outside of work. But I watched Blue Bloods for a long time, and I remember many times, and I'm rewatching it with my roommate, and like Frank would go to confession, but then at some point the priest or father would be like, "Yeah," I was like, "I don't think we need to sit in here to talk about this, have this conversation." And then they would go out in the pews and sit.
Right.
So it's kind of the level, but at this point, like Eddie hasn't really expressed that he's okay with talking to him outside of confessional about this because Eddie's just really
Right.
starting to process, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's some questionable things here, but
Yeah, especially since it seems like this is very early on in Eddie like exploring like the faith part of it and like going to confession. Like obviously it is because he had said he hadn't been in like 15 plus
23
years.
years.
Oh yeah, 23 years. That's what
23
it was.
years. That's how old I am. I
Yeah.
just turned 23. I'm just saying. So yeah, I will say I think the general merit of the conversation, the general lessons that were being spoken, I think they were good things. I don't know, I felt like this conversation made everything feel rushed.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, which I've been feeling pacing has kind of been all over the place this season for me. Everything just feels weird. So, and I definitely feel like in this scene particularly, it felt weird. So I was like, I maybe would have preferred this. Again, I would prefer this have been maybe over several sessions with Frank, or even like them getting increasingly comfortable, like him and Father Brian was speaking to each other like like gradually migrating out of the confessional booth into the
Mhm.
church, and then maybe later them stumbling across each other in the wild. But like, I don't know. I would have preferred this to have been taken a little slower, but I ultimately like the message that was being said. I do think it's
Right.
something Eddie needed to hear, but I just feel like he didn't have the established relationship with Father Brian that
Yeah.
warranted this happening. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we're all in agreement on that. Oh boy, I forgot about this call. Okay, so next call that we get, this was weird. I'm sorry. So the family's putting in the pool, and there's a hole in the ground, and it's a family with two brothers, and the one brother wanted the other brother to read him this story that had already been read, plenty of times, and the older brother was annoyed. The little brother wound up getting into the drain pipe. And I'm like, oh, this is just Eddie Begins, which I'm pretty sure I've heard that they reused footage from Eddie Begins. And I'm like,
Oh yeah, I did hear that.
I can maybe, I can maybe understand them using this as some sort of like symbolism or sign for Eddie, but it actually wound up not being a sign for Eddie. It was one for Chim. I'm so
Yeah.
like, what? But so the 118 responds, and they're all too big to fit. And even Bobby makes a point of, I don't think you're going down this time, Eddie, which I was at least glad they didn't like ignore that this had
Right.
happened before. So they sent the older brother down to pull him up. And I don't know, did
It
this
was
serve
interesting.
for did this serve for multiple people? Because I felt like I mainly saw it serve for Chim.
I feel like it was mostly for Chim, but also this was just a way for like everyone to kind of like realize things in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely seemed like it mostly was serving for Chim. Seeing that right now G doesn't have a sibling, and if something like this happened, you know, um, the sibling would be helpful. And I think Chim kind of grew up as an only child, and then all of a sudden Albert came into the picture, and so
Well, he
he's
had
Kevin.
Kevin.
Kevin, that's his name. But I don't know what age Kevin came into the picture at for him. It
Seems
seemed
like
like Chim was very
high school.
lonely as a kid.
Yeah. I think he was probably like a teenager because it was after his mom died and he was a kid when his
Yeah.
mom died, and then like Kevin was his mom's best friend's son.
So they probably knew each other, but they didn't have much more than like how kids are all friends with everyone they meet kind of deal. They probably didn't have much
Right.
more than that. That's
Yeah.
what I'm guessing at least. Now, I grew up with three older sisters, so I would definitely not know what the prospect of an only child life looks like. But
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, yeah. I don't really either because I was 3 when my brother was born. I had just turned 3. Um, so all I remember is having a sibling. I don't remember not,
Yeah.
especially at this point in my life. But also like I had my next door neighbor was an only child, and honestly, a lot of the times, like he would come over here a lot, like and stuff, to the point that like when I was a kid and you go to places and it'd be like kids eat free on Sundays. And so we'd always go out on Sundays and he'd always come with us. It was honestly like he was only like just under a month older than me. So it was honestly like, yeah, we're really close in age, but it was like having like an older brother and like that kind of thing. So I kind of understand it in that aspect too.
Yeah.
You can definitely tell who people are like based on their birth order too. I totally believe that.
Right.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
I had a friend and we didn't like we're not friends anymore, but we didn't get along. And she was almost both like the baby of the family and an only child because her brother, and I believe like the father remarried, so it was her half brother. And her brother was like 30 years older than her, or
Wow.
like he was 40 and she was, I don't know, like she was a lot younger than he was. So like he obviously had his own family or whatever, and then she was like she was like the parents, like, I guess, only kid, but like she also had a brother, but it was essentially like she was an only child and a baby at the same time.
Right.
It just occurred to me in thinking that like most of my friends are eldest
Yeah.
children. I'm just saying, I'm like, and I'm very definitively the baby of the family. But I think I only have like I like one friend who's also the baby of the family, and then another friend who's a middle child. But most people that like I played with are older. I don't know, maybe it's just because I grew up with like being the youngest. I just know how to get along with that energy. I don't know. I guess I can't put it off any longer. We have a scene I am not excited to talk about next, and I have a lot of thoughts.
I think we all have a lot of feelings.
Oh,
It was even harder rewatching it, and the scene took forever to watch too.
There's yeah. I'm just gonna say going into this, that at parts in this episode, and especially during this scene, I am aware Ryan is gay, but there are times where I was like, were there any queer eyes on this script at all? Because there are some dubious things happening and being communicated.
Let me be
Uh,
real, that Ryan Murphy has not touched 911 in years.
yeah.
Same
I'm
with
just like,
like I always make the joke about Lone Star as well as 911 that Ryan Murphy very much like put his name on something, worked on it for a little
yeah,
bit, and then he dipped.
yeah. I mean, it seemed like Tim Minear was pretty solidly the person happening behind the scenes here. And obviously, I don't know what his deal is, but I was just so much of this. I'm like, was there a gay or bisexual person at all in the writers' room or approving the script? Because it does not feel like it. So okay, let's just okay, get into it.
I know.
So
Yeah.
Tommy comes over. They're clearly going to like a movie or some sort of date night. And he's happy. He's talking about how he got a spot just out front, and he's like, "Oh, I should Uber so I don't lose."
Right.
So
um,
relatable.
that's so real. And Buck's like, "Yeah, absolutely, yeah, sure, but like, can we talk first?" And Tommy's like, "What's up?" And like the way his eyes shift, it's like, oh, does he think it's gonna be talking, or does he think it's gonna be talking? Like, what version of talking are we talking?
Right.
Anyhow, so they go to sit down, and Buck says how he's been thinking about what Tommy shared at the restaurant the other night. To which Tommy went, "My spumani." I'm like, no, not your
Maybe not
dessert.
that.
Right.
Not that. He's good with levity though. I think you can tell Buck's stressed, and so he's trying to help. And so Buck's like, how he appreciates how honest Tommy was with him, so he wants to be honest with Tommy. And Tommy's like, Buck, you make it sound so dooming. And then Buck proceeds to share with Tommy a picture, and it's of Buck and Abby. And it's Buck's like, oh, this will help explain, or at least help break the ice. And he's, it's they're just like kind of in a generic photo pose in the first one. So Tommy's like, "Oh, you knew Abby? No way!" And then he swipes, and it's one of them kissing, and he's like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
and Buck's like, "I'm the himbo."
That
But you
was
know what?
like that was
He
a
was
little
a little bit
funny.
of a himbo, okay? We're just gonna say he was a little bit of a himbo. I don't mean that
Season
derogatively.
one, he was, yeah, that would be a good description. At least in episode one. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, he was. It's funny thinking about, and just I think it's like good for Buck for like embracing that and being able to admit that he was very much, in fact, a hippo at that point of his life. Like, good on you.
Yeah. And obviously Tommy's shocked by this, and Buck's like, "Oh, it's crazy, right?" And Tommy's like, "Yeah, and a little awkward." And Buck's like, "Yeah, it was it was for me too." And then Buck's like, he should have been honest with Tommy at dinner." I'm like, "Well, that would have taken a turn at dinner, that's for sure." Um,
mhm.
I'm wondering what he would have said if they hadn't been interrupted by the waiter. Because they were interrupted by the waiter then. But Tommy's like, freaked you out a little. And Buck's like, yeah. Tommy's like, obviously, if he'd known, he would never would have used the word, and he doesn't think Buck's a himbo. And Buck's like, well, but I was, but that was before Abby. What he had with her was not that.
Right.
And Buck says, how his relationship with Abby was, it was the most transformative of his life until now. And he thinks that's one of the reasons why he is so comfortable with Tommy, is because Tommy is so comfortable with himself. And Tommy is like, he was not always like that. And Buck knows that, and it makes him admire Tommy more now. Which I'm just gonna say, I think things started going downhill when the word admire was used. Tommy was already a little freaked out, but admire, not maybe the best angle he could have gone at there. Buck then asks Tommy to move in with him and says how he is ready to take the next step. And at first, obviously, Tommy doesn't think he's serious. Buck even says, he's not saying let's get married or engaged, even though we could now, because of people like you. But let's move in together, because why be apart when they could be together? I'm like, okay, that's sweet, but also you messed up a few lines ago. I'm just gonna say. I'm just saying that why I'm saying like he messed up and why the admiration line wasn't great. It sounded like hero worship. I feel like he took a little bit of the wrong things to say from what Josh had said. Not that he didn't understand the message, but that he just kind of chose to look at it the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is a little on a pedestal feeling. Okay. Then Tommy says, Evan, that's so sweet, but I can't move in with you. And Buck's like, well, why not? And Tommy's like, because he knows how this ends. And Buck's like, well, what's that supposed to mean? And Tommy says, look, Evan, you're an incredible guy. You're big-hearted, hot as hell, funny, impulsive, but you're feeling, fuck, I hate what happens. But what you're feeling right now is new, and that's exciting. It feels like forever, but you're still figuring yourself out, and that's good. I'm gonna fight someone at ABC. I'm just saying that. Like, Riders and I are going in a ring, and I'm leaving the victor. I have a lot of issues with some choices they decided to make here. Anyhow, Buck asks what he's saying, and Tommy says that he's saying no matter how bad he wanted to be, he's not Buck's last. He's Buck's first. And Buck's like, well, they can be the same thing. And Tommy says how they usually aren't. And if you were to move in with Buck wouldn't mean to, and he wouldn't plan for it, but he would wind up breaking Tommy's heart. And how he doesn't think he could deal with that. And then he says he should go. And Tommy's like, wait, did you just break up with me? And Tommy's like, I guess I did. And he even seems startled that he did it. And he's like, "I'll believe me, I didn't see it coming either." And Tommy makes a comment how he should have known the parking spot was too good to be true. And then he says, "I'll see you around, Buck."
And I'm like, well, that cut deep, because he had only ever called him Evan, and that was like behind the scenes, that was very adamant that he was only to call him Evan. He was never to call him Buck. Like, that was in all the scripts. That couldn't be deterred. Like, it was very much like a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, once that happened, I was like, no.
Yeah.
There was so much to freaking unpack about that, and we've been sitting on this for freaking months. I understand that Grace just watched this, but like, we have been like
I already knew what happened.
I know you knew about it, but like, it's
so
still
I've
different when
also
you
been
actually watch it.
Yeah.
I think we were recording
we were
when
recording.
we saw this, or right after we finished recording that day when this was aired, and then we were talking about it, so we had a chance to rehash it like at that time.
Well, I think oh yeah, because I sort of remember, because it's like, oh damn, something just happened, and then I was just like,
I think we were recording at the time.
No, I know
think
we
that
for
part
sure
of it was on
were.
recording. Yeah.
I know we were. It was just
because
like,
you probably had to cut that. I don't know if you did cut it, but like, probably had to cut that.
Yeah. It was kind of like one of those things, like, do I want to be spoiled on this or not? I think at the time, but yeah, there is so much to freaking unpack. It's kind of like, It's one of those things where I know like night I don't even want to put a number on it, but the majority of the fandom was not like into Buck Tommy for like whatever reason. I honestly don't understand. I know Lou said some like questionable things, and honestly it seemed like in the beginning that
Not
people
really.
people liked Buck Tommy, and then it almost seemed like when Lou said something people like turned his words and they didn't then it was like, oh, we don't like Tommy anymore or something like that. That's what it seemed like to
Let's be
me.
clear, he didn't really say anything. He said a couple of things which maybe could have been worded a little better, but he didn't even really say anything all that questionable.
Right. I
Um,
agree with that. Yeah, like
and like, I don't know, Lou breathed and the Phantom had a fit.
Right.
pretty much. And like I understand that like some things were said and like it was maybe not the best wording, but it's like we're all human, we all mess up, we all say things that maybe weren't worded the best or maybe weren't exactly how they were, but like we're all human. So like to me, it seems like people were like unfair. And I know, like, with the season starting, it was kind of like one of those things that, like, it felt like from the start of the season that they were obviously looking for a way to break them up because that's just where things were gonna go. So I was just like, at the start of the season, I was hopeful nothing like that would happen, and then everyone would be wrong, minus like the people that actually like genuinely liked Buck and Tommy. But just the fact that they were basically just trying to burn it down and figure out a way to do that for like the whole season, and I don't know.
Well,
It's pointless. It literally is. And honestly, I was just I didn't like when this aired because so many people that didn't like Buck Tommy were like so happy. They're like, "Oh, Buck Tommy Bones." And I hate that that was friggin' put out there that people were just like happy over it. I'm just like I think that we should all be able to coexist. If you don't like a ship, that's fine, but like you don't need to like I don't know. Some people were just like to the max hateful about it. It wasn't even like normally it's like, "Oh, I don't like this ship. Okay, that's fine. You can like them, but I don't." And it did not that was not the energy of like if people did not like Buck Tommy, oh, they really did not like them.
I mean, I was in the social media trenches for this ship war. That still goes on because people are annoyed that we didn't immediately evaporate once they broke up. Let me be very clear in case anyone's forgotten. For almost the entire show, I have been an ardent buddy shipper. And then Buck Tommy showed up on the scene. I was like, oh, actually, this is cute. I actually really like this, and I was a multi-shipper. And then the fandom turned me off of Buddy. Do I still
Yeah.
have a space in my heart for them? I absolutely do. But I watched myself and other people get sent death threats. I saw Lou get sent death threats. I saw myself get targeted with pedophilic content because I liked Buck Tommy.
Yeah. It got really disgusting there for a while. And still going on.
It got awful. And it's still, yeah, it's still bad. That is forever marred for me. I cannot return to the Buddy fandom. I'm sad it got destroyed for me like that because I am a multi-shipper generally. But Buck Tommy did become my OTP, like my one true pairing replacing Buddy, and then it just fell off for that. So that has not changed. I will just say I am still a fervent Buck Tommy shipper. Um and this was a difficult episode for multiple reasons, but also because for one thing, this was filmed before the Halloween episode. So they filmed all the scenes that we got in the Halloween episode knowing that they had already filmed the breakup. And I have a fair amount of issues that came with that because everything they did was just to make it hurt more. I know that the fans were looking for, I think a lot of people fell victim to, not fell victim, that makes it sound like that wasn't their choice. I think a lot of people thought, oh, Buck's bi now. That's great. Tommy's a shiny new toy that will go away after 3 episodes, and then Buck and Eddie will ride off into the sunset, and there'll be no issues whatsoever with that whole problem. Which I understand that is the fandom dream. I get it. That is a lot of ships' dreams. That our favorites will run off into sunset together. But then he didn't go away, and so those people that were originally accepting towards Buck Tommy got annoyed. So I will say that I don't think the Buck Tommy fandom is as small as people think it is. I just think the Buddy fandom it definitely is larger, but it's also really loud. Meanwhile, we have also been over here. I'm not saying there haven't been bad apples in our bunch. There have absolutely been, but we're just over here enjoying this. And so
Yeah, it has been
the
bad on
fact
both sides. It has,
it,
like,
I will say it has been bad on Buddy's side and a couple bad apples on ours. I'm not going to call my side of it bad because I don't know. From what I saw, I didn't see anyone
oh
really
yeah, I
behaving
agree.
badly. I just know people did.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And the fandom is a whole different part of it. So that's just to explain what my feelings on things were going into this. So obviously I did not want the breakup to be a thing. I'm still mad about it. I am still mad, and I do think that there is setup, especially with what I know what happens for later episodes. It's not an impossibility that they could get back together, but I'm not going to say whether I think that is actually going to happen or not. But what I hate
Yeah.
is how they decided to go about this. Because for one thing, it's not even like they broke up because Tommy didn't love Buck or didn't want to be with him. It's because he was scared, which is a great classic breakup and makeup trope, I'm just gonna say. But it's the fact that they had to put in stuff like the biphobic narrative of, oh, this is still new, you're still figuring yourself out, you've got to explore, you've got to sleep around, that kind of deal, which it is biphobic, multi-sexual phobic. I'm sorry, this has been a major thing. People keep saying that people who are multisexual cannot be faithful because we are attracted to multiple genders. Well, guess what? People attracted to one gender can't be faithful either. It's about the same statistics.
Yep, it's true.
So the
Yeah,
idea that, oh, they need to sleep around, hey, listen, I like all of them. That doesn't mean I've slept around.
right,
That doesn't mean I want to sleep around.
right. It's
I'm
like,
I'm I'm Omni and Demi. That means I like everybody and nobody at the exact same time. Do you know how difficult it is in my dating life?
yeah, uh, yeah. I understand that maybe they didn't have the intentions of doing some things with these storylines, but it definitely came off a totally different way than they intended. Like, I don't necessarily think that Tommy was just telling Buck to just, okay, now you can just go sleep around. But like, I can understand the sentiment of like him wanting to experience more or stuff, but like, I don't like this. Like, this is just, they were totally plotting the whole season and being like, okay, well, we're gonna break them up. That's gonna be our thing. And how are we gonna do this? Okay, well, I guess this is how we're gonna do it. And I uh, just the fact the breakup makes me mad. I don't even know what to say, and I feel like the words are honestly circling each other at this point
Yeah.
because I'm just like, what else can we say? But I definitely, I don't know. It's also like, I don't know. I mm, I really what I will say is I liked Buck Tommy because they weren't. It wasn't like it honestly came out of nowhere, and then once we got it, I was like, oh, okay, I could get behind this.
Like they the dynamic, the
They had a
storyline, they
really
knocked
good
it out of the
dynamic.
ballpark.
Yeah, they had a
Yeah.
really good dynamic, and it was kind of like um old 118 meets new 118, and it was very like cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that, but like I yeah, it's unfortunate, and I know things happen coming up. I don't I don't know what the season's gonna end on, and I know like scheduling was kind of hard, like they couldn't get Lou for like certain times in their filming, so I understand that that could have played a part in it too. It is
I mean,
unfortunate though.
he didn't even know before he got the script. I've read certain interviews. It's not he wanted to stay and do the character,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I realize I sound annoyed and mad. It's because I don't like any of how this played out, and it feels like the bullies won, even though Buddy's not a thing that's even happened. And I'm not saying this as an anti-Buddy thing, it's as an anti-Phantom thing. It just feels like the bullies won. Like we went through so much pain. Lou got death threats. There were things talking about taking him out and shooting him. Okay, like it was bad. We went through all that, and they gave us this. Like it doesn't even feel like the breakup was treated with respect. It doesn't feel like any of it was treated like it meant something, and it meant so much to so many people. And it meant so much to like it meant so much to me. Like it's a close thing to my heart. So of course I have hopes and dreams that this will get resolved. I do think it is a great setup for a makeup arc.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I've sort of lost my faith in 911 because it just felt like the season in general has kind of been a little disjointed. It feels like they prioritized the wrong things, which I could definitely go into at another point in time. I don't know what's happening. It just does not feel like it's as good as season 7. And I don't think they even know what they're doing.
Yeah,
So,
season 7 was really good, so I feel like it's so hard to top because I just want to go rewatch it just thinking about it, but like
right, it was so good.
I
Every bit of
remember
it.
it was
Yeah.
good. And yeah, it's just I don't know what they were like. I understand sort of what they were trying to do, but I'm also like I don't really understand why we had to do this. I feel like they could have if they really did want to do breakup, they could have I don't know. It would have been harder
They
if
could have
they
done a
had
lot
been
better.
yeah, they could have obviously they could have done a lot better, but I feel like the longer
Mm.
they were together, if they had kept it on longer, it would have been harder because obviously like the
Mm.
longer they're together, the more attached they are. And it was
Oh,
already
I'm plenty
to that
attached.
point.
Tommy Kennard is one of my favorite characters in general.
Well,
Not even just a 911. He is one of my favorite characters.
well,
I'm
yeah, not even
attached.
that, but like Buck and
But
Tommy.
yeah,
Um,
that too. Uh,
that's
I mean,
yeah, that's mostly it.
I know Katie and I have talked a lot. EJ, did you have stuff you wanted to say? Because we have
Oh,
dominated this conversation so far.
I have a
But
ton to say. Okay,
go
so
for it.
I I have a I have a lot of like scattered thoughts.
That's why I've been talking around circles.
Honestly, we have, but it's okay.
Okay. Tommy is right in calling Buck out for why didn't you say something at dinner? But Buck had reasons and he had a reason why he didn't want to say anything because that would have been very awkward. So I get, and I'm really proud of Buck for being willing to come out and say, I'm who you were talking about, because he could have easily just swept it under the rug, just never said anything. And then all of a sudden, somehow Tommy would get in touch with like Abby, or there would be some way that there would be
Abby
a
shows up a
connection.
third time.
Yeah, and like, and then be like, wait a second, what? Like you're the, and yeah. So I'm proud of Buck for that. What I am
He's
not,
grown.
I've been really avoiding social media. I literally go on to like social media now and I like a couple posts, read a couple things, and then I get out of there. I'm not going to get into the drama. I am disappointed in my fellow Buddy fans. As Grace said, I have been an avid Buddy fan since the day one of Eddie joining the 118. And I am disappointed in how many of them acted. But we saw it in Lone Star fandom. We've seen it in other fandoms. I saw it in the Glee fandom a lot. If you didn't follow the who was like Rachel was with at that time, like if you swayed at all, you were shunned and treated like shit. And this happened again with Buddy, or with the Tommy fans and the Buddy fans and Buck Tommy fans. And I am so disappointed that many of these children started sending like, what good is that? Except you're a cyber bully because you can do it from your little screen and nobody ever sees your face when you're doing it and you can get away with it. Like, I'm so disappointed. The show, honestly, Tommy, when you look at it, he was right. Tommy is older than Buck by many years. We know this. Tommy has been living his life as a queer person for many years. Buck has just only found out that he's bisexual. So what Tommy said is factually true. The chances of Buck staying and solely only being with Tommy for the rest of his life is very slim to none. Not to say, like Grace said, there's a chance they could get back together later on. And I know that Lou is doing some episodes of SWAT. So conflicts, there's a lot of filming and things going on at the same time. He could come back at a later date. Things could happen again. Next thing you know, they could get back together. Buck could have another boyfriend. And so I am not against Buck and Tommy getting back together. I am not against Buck and Eddie getting together, but Eddie's got more shit on his plate right now than he needs. He's got a son who currently doesn't want to even live in the same state as him. And Eddie's dealing with that. He needs to deal with that and put his son first. So I get that the Buddy fans want them together, but you're going to have to wait probably another season, maybe 2, just to even get to that point.
Get to Eddie being ready for that kind of
For
thing.
Eddie to even have a relationship, let alone having a, coming out arc of any kind.
Yeah. I still feel like it's one of those things, like, people think with the more seasons we get and with like different things happening that like we're getting closer, but I honestly think we couldn't be getting further away from a potential Buddy ever happening. Honestly, I'm not even told that they're ever going to happen with things that have been said on and off screen.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, EJ, you said it better than I could. Like, the way you phrase things, I applaud it, because that is what I was trying to say and I couldn't come up with all the words. So I think pretty much everything you said.
Episodes,
yeah.
So I totally understand. Like, you were
and like I'm still like so emotionally impacted from having, honestly, the trauma of having been, I think I had to really acknowledge as like kind of being traumatic, having been in the social media aspect of things. So I think I'm still being majorly impacted by a lot of things that myself and my fellow Buck Tommies went through. So I am definitely still very reactive because
you're
of that.
raw. You're
very much,
and that's okay. You're reacting, and we talk about it in a lot. There's a difference between reacting and responding, and you've had an experience. I mean, and I wasn't okay. I was in the Glee fandom. I was in the Puckleberry fandom, as in Puck and Rachel. I hated Finn and Rachel together. Never wanted them to get together. Hated them so bad. But if I didn't fall in line, everybody hated on Puckleberry fans because that'll never happen. Puck and Rachel will never be. You know what? That didn't happen. Rachel and Puck never did end up getting together. You know what? I still stuck with them as my fan. And just
good on you.
The crap
I know it's difficult
that fans and fandoms do. Like, and I get it. There's amazing fans out there. I have made amazing fans. The 3 of us here would not be here if it weren't for the fandom that we were in.
Exactly.
But there's always those bad eggs that ruin it for the rest of us. And it makes me, as a fan of the show, almost not want to even get online and talk about my favorite show or my favorite characters or my favorite ships, because I'm afraid of how people are going to respond to it.
Yeah, like it's kind of like when I talk about things, I won't specifically talk about like how I feel about certain ships or certain characters for the fact of like people being like how people act. Like, I don't even want to even say that I like, certain ships, because it's just like I don't want people to like, not even that I care about what people say, because I honestly don't. I have really thick skin since I've been on social media for a long time. But like, I still don't want to put certain things out there, so I guess I was kind of like
Yeah.
not saying certain things when I posted about things, but like I did follow a lot of Buck Tommy fans too, so I'm like, at
Mhm.
least there's that.
Yeah.
But like that's kind of the thing. It kind of reminds me of like a couple years ago with like when Taylor was on the show. And like if you had
Yeah.
said on Twitter that you don't like Taylor, it was like people like you hate women, and I'm just like, how the hell can you hate women if you are a woman?
Okay.
And
Oh,
like,
okay. I will just say, I'm sorry. I'm gonna insert myself here. That is very much a thing. I just DNF'd a book that was so deeply misogynistic, and it
Oh,
was
did you
written
finally
by
DNF?
a woman. Yep, I DNF'd it, and it was so bad. Well, it was actually one of those blind dates with a book, so I told you guys about last time. It was so deeply misogynistic that I kept checking the name on the front of the cover because I was like, this can't possibly have been written by a woman. It was.
oh,
And so, yeah, I was like, it was so bad. Literally, she called the women bitch more than woman. DNF 58 pages in. So I will just say it is absolutely a thing that women are. I actually find women to be some of the most misogynistic towards each other because also we know where to hit. But I will just say I don't hate women. I hated that woman.
Yeah.
yeah,
Taylor
that's my
on my
thing.
shit list.
But my thing is like you can't just throw that around
Yeah.
saying like, oh, you must hate women. Um, no, you're allowed to dislike characters and dislike, honestly, dislike people. You don't have to like everyone. That's just the fact of life that you you don't have to like everything or everyone. And I did not like her for obvious reasons. And it's just like that is my experience with like hatred in the fandom because literally I was like blocking accounts left and right just because
Right.
I don't want, and this is one of the reasons why I don't really post anything on there anymore. Like I found my own space on the internet and I'm happy
Mhm.
about it.
That's so
Um
true.
so I just I can't even like fathom. Like I understand there's hate everywhere, but like I can't even fathom like anything that has happened that
Yeah.
was that yeah.
And I
Yeah.
will say, like, I know like we're on a long tangent, and
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of glad we are, because I will be on, and yes, we're talking about Buck Tommy stuff and Buddy stuff, but I will say that in retrospect, these behaviors from fans have been around for the female love interests as well. And I did not realize it as much because I actually did not like a lot of the female love interests, not because they were women necessarily, but just because they were either underdeveloped or, in Taylor's case, kind of toxic, or honestly just underdeveloped. They were just there. And I would did like a lot of them for a fair amount of reasons, but I liked a few of them. Um, like I still like Allie to this day, but she also did barely die screen time. So like, you know, I guess you
Right.
can't win. But I will say that like I'm sad that it takes the toxicity towards men for us to start acknowledging some of the shit we as the fandom have kind of put a lot of the female actresses through. Um, but I will just say this is a fandom rooted problem. And this is not 911 specific. Fandoms are just like this. As you were saying with the Queen, as honestly, you could go into so many different fandoms.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Star Wars, you could go in that fandom, you're gonna get crucified. So if you say you don't like Raylo, people are gonna kill you. I hate Raylo. So just putting that out there. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, and I know I said a lot of things, and I'm just disappointed that it's turned me away from interacting with a lot of fans that aren't like ones I already know. Because and I also worry saying what I said, because by not taking a stance, it has been recently, if you don't take a stance, that's your stance. And so like then you're accused of just other things. And so it's like, well, I'm damned if I do and
in
damned if I don't.
some things that is true. Like I think that's true in like a lot of political matters. When it comes to fandom, not so much.
Yeah.
It's okay to abstain from the
Right.
arguments.
You know, and it just boils, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Like
Agreed.
if many people would just stick with that, our fandoms would not be being torn to shit. Just say it. Like,
Yeah,
True.
honestly. And
True.
it's like a lot of these people that were like, I know like people were like doxing people and like, you know, doing the hate threat thing. And it's just like I remember somebody I knew that was on the other side of things, like they got doxed by somebody and um they had found out who the person's mother was. It was a child. It was like teenager or something. And they literally told the mother about it and the kid got in a lot of trouble.
Okay, I love that. Because doxing is just so dangerous and you can get like that gets you in real world trouble, man.
Yeah, because it was like, okay, well, if you don't deal with this with your kid, I am going to bring this up with the police.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Well, I'm glad
I
that
feel.
the kid at least got
Yes.
their ass handed to them. But yeah, so we all had a lot of feelings on that, and I'm kind of glad we all talked about that. I definitely, you know, it's a very complicated circumstance. But let's really quick just round out the last couple of scenes before we say any more, because I keep forgetting there are like 2 more scenes.
Yeah, that's why I was like, okay, maybe we should move on a little bit.
Yes.
Just a little bit. Okay, let's do this. Because I know we've Katie, I'm so sorry for your editing process.
It's okay.
It'll be a long one. So next scene. Let's move on from this for a little bit. So Maddie comes home to Chim, and the topic of baby comes up again, and Maddie asks Chim what changed his mind. Because he's like, yeah, let's try it. And Chim talks about the call they went on that day, and it showed Chim that he wanted G to have a little brother or sister who will always be there for, they'll always be there for each other. And Maddie asks if Chim is sure, and he says he is, but that he needs to set some ground rules. And he tells Maddie that if she's ever feeling sad or overwhelmed, she needs to tell him and to never leave or try to handle it on her own. And then Chim says, you're pregnant already, aren't you? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I already knew that spoiler, so I'm just watching the rest of it like, yeah. And then Maddie's like, well, I also have ground rules are one rule, and that's that they can't go into this acting like she's broken or a bomb that is going to go off any second. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I liked that they brought this up in this episode because it was kind of like, I think in the past it was like, oh, G might be like our only child. And then they brought this up and I had a feeling that this is what they were moving towards. And I like it because I don't know. I think the thing I was thinking about this whole time is usually if you have bouts of like postpartum depression before, at least it makes you aware that like it could be a potential thing that could happen again. And then obviously you know like what to do and like your doctors are aware of it.
Yeah.
And like that kind of stuff. So it's like,
And
yes, it was very scary before, but like now
Yeah.
you're gonna go into it this time and it's gonna be like, okay, well now we know how to handle this.
Yeah.
And it's not just gonna hit us like out of nowhere.
Right. And there are safe medications doctors can put pregnant women on to help with depression and anxiety to try and curb some of that before the baby is born. And as long as they're aware of it, that they had a problem with it in a previous pregnancy, then yeah, they can get on top of it a lot sooner.
Yeah. And like there will definitely be let's see. There will be some things like I think Maddie by this point is in her early 40s, so she's kind of getting towards the end likely of when she could have another baby. I say as my mom had me at 42, which is generally considered older for having babies. So I don't even remember how old Jennifer Love Hewitt is, but I think she's about early 40s. So I don't know. I'm wondering if they're taking this angle because Jennifer Love Hewitt might be pregnant herself again, or if they're just doing this because they wanted to explore like
I
that.
don't think she is, but yeah, she did
Yeah.
have a baby just a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I was just thinking like maybe they know something we don't know, but I don't know. Always a possibility, but also I just like the idea of them like, going along with that anyway. So I'll honestly say that's maybe one of the storylines I am actively looking forward to most at this point in time is seeing what happens there.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
so I think like, my Madney experience is still very wholesome and um intact, and I'm just very excited to see what happens next.
Oh
So
yeah,
then we
same.
get our final scene. We get Eddie. And he shaves his mustache, which listen, I was never like the biggest fan of mustache, but seeing him with his naked upper lip now is incredibly
It
weird.
is weird because for the
Yeah.
past 6 episodes, we've literally seen the mustache. So the fact that it's gone is weird.
Yeah.
Also, it did grow on me, I will say.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit like a fungus, but it did grow on
it
me.
did grow. Yeah, I will agree with that. Like, I do not like mustaches. Like, I'm just not
Me
really a fan
neither.
of
Yeah.
them. Like, I don't mind facial hair, but mustaches, I just can't get behind. It's just not, I don't know, don't love them.
Mm,
So it was just like, and I always hate shows always do this. They give the character a mustache like out of nowhere, and you're just like, oh. So
yeah,
yeah, I was just like, okay, well, war is over. It's gone.
man. So then we go into a dancing scene with him, with apparently paying homage to some like risky business. I'm not familiar with risky business myself, but I've heard the reference. Um, and he's just dancing around in his tidy whities and a button-down shirt, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Go off, my dude.
His legs look
I
so
guess.
good. I will say that
Right.
when I was watching, I was like,
True.
So
damn. And I
Also, I keep
did,
forgetting he's a dancer. Like I keep like he did Step
yes,
Up.
the
He
Step It Up
did,
movies.
yeah.
And
yeah.
I was
He
actually
He's good.
earlier watching an interview with Ryan talking about this scene. So he had basically said that the idea of this came from actually Kenny, Kenneth
Oh,
Choi,
I feel like I've
and
heard of
Tim
that, which I love
Minear.
that.
And
Mhm.
basically, Tim has been like for years trying to figure out a way to get Ryan to dance on 911, but like, so like this is actually Kenny's idea. Was like, oh, we could do this, and so they did it. And Ryan was like saying, like in the Step It Up movies, like I obviously he's like I haven't danced on screen since a really long time, like it's been a while.
right.
Um, but like, and he's like, it's very different from me in those movies dancing as Sean than Eddie dancing. Like Eddie is more clumsy and he doesn't have like that
Yeah.
kind of skill. Where like obviously he like in the other movies he's been in, it's like he's more of a trained dancer. So like
Mm,
there's that, and I just loved hearing like that tidbit and
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like, but this scene, and I honestly, this is the scene where I was like, wait, this was in this episode? I don't know why, but
Mhm.
like, it had been a while since I rewatched any or watched these episodes in general. So this is like my first rewatch since like the hiatus. Um,
Yeah.
and I had forgot that this was in this episode. I had remembered it being much later for whatever reason, and I was like, oh.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew about this scene because I don't know, this scene did cause a stir online, and I'm just gonna say I don't see why. I liked the scene. I just see it was very representative of like Eddie finally like letting go a little bit, letting go of
Yeah.
Yeah,
control,
I
letting
loved
himself
it.
just feel joy, and I
Right.
am here for it. Again,
Well,
Eddie has always been one of my favorite characters, so
yeah.
even with the whole thing that has happened as of the last season or two, even with all of that, it is just good to kind of see him coming into himself a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and Father
and
Brian earlier in the episode had kind of pointed out that he was not doing anything for himself, wasn't taking care of himself because he was so focused on Chris and everybody else that he needed to do something fun for himself. And this was Eddie's response to that.
Yeah.
I
It
feel like
I
was.
he's
loved it.
I feel like
Oh,
he's
I
having to
love
have
it.
some flipped around experiences because what is he like? 34 by the scene or whatever, 33, 34 by the season. Um and so he's definitely like doing because he became a father so early and was in the military and everything. I feel like he's just having some experiences that he didn't get to have as a young adult.
Oh, for
Um
sure.
and even now in his mid 30s. And I'm like, hell yeah. Also, you're never too old to do that. Like, fuck yeah,
Right.
dance
Right.
around in your underwear. Hell yeah, I do that all the
Right. It's
And
your own
like,
house. You can do what you want.
yeah, like, and like, this is like
time.
Eddie's first time basically being alone in a
Mhm.
long time. So it's just like he's always had Chris around. So it's just like him having that. It's so weird. And we didn't get that context, I believe, until last season of the fact that Eddie was such a young father and then he was in the military. So it is weird to think about in a sense. Like it's not weird, but it's just like we never none of us really ever realized that, I guess.
Yeah.
It hits more and more with like the more context you get. And also I think this is good for him because if he hadn't tackled it now, he would have had it slap him across the face when Chris did get old enough to move out. And then he was just alone.
Right.
Like what would he be? Early 40s? Like you still have a lot of life to live.
Yep.
And suddenly, hey, your kid's out and headed to college, most likely. And then it's like, oh, well, what do I do with
Especially
myself
with your
now?
only kid, that really hits parents. Like when
Yeah.
I went off to school, like I remember um actually, this is kind of funny to mention, but when I was in kindergarten, of course, my mom cried, and my dad was like, "What are you gonna do when you go to college? Cry?"
Did
And
she cry?
my mom's like, "Yeah," and of course, then I go to college. My mom cried. Honestly, my mom cried. I cried, and then I went off to another school, and I cried. I don't know if my mom cried that time, but I did. But like it's just like it reminds me of that in a sense. So it's just like it's
Yeah.
a very like life normal thing, but just it is
For
I can
sure.
imagine how weird it is very weird. It's weird when like you're well, because normally when you're like a young adult, when you're like 18, you either go off to college or do whatever. And like if you it's like when you do go away, it's like, oh, my parents aren't around. This is weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I definitely had that experience where I'm just like, oh, well, this is strange.
Yeah. I went through
Yeah.
the same thing because I spent my 20s working and then taking care of my parents. So I didn't have a lot of, my 20s. And then my 30s, it's like, oh, I have my mom had passed away by then. And I was like, oh, I can go out dancing and it's okay. And, just life that you don't realize you'd been taking care of people for so long that you're like, oh, yeah, you have a life to live yourself. Um, so I'm like, I was
Yeah.
proud of Eddie for doing that. And I know Ryan, I don't know if you guys heard, but so a couple years ago, Twitch, he was a very
I
successful,
remember. I know
well-known
Twitch.
Yeah.
dancer.
Yeah.
Was in the Step Up movies with Ryan, and he taught Ryan a lot. And he passed away. And I know Ryan has for Ryan, I'm sure that was a big thing because Twitch is gone now and they were friends. And so, he was an amazing dancer. Um,
Yeah.
Gone too soon for
And
sure.
s- for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely, as all of us just said, it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And I really hope that everyone remembers, like, first of all, you're never too old or grown up to have fun. Jesus
Amen.
Christ, I'm gonna be if I live to 99, I will be 99 and having a fucking ball. Okay, I listen. I am going to enjoy my life because I am a child of heart. So yeah, that's all. to say with that. And then we end out the scene. So it ends with the doorbell ringing, and then it's Buck, and he just hands Eddie a beer without saying anything, and they just end this episode by sitting there. Buck's
Yeah.
like morosely staring into the distance, and Eddie's just sitting there in his underwear.
Oh, it was so funny how casual it was.
Yeah,
And just
like
the
there was
fact
no
that Buck comes in, hands him a beer, they take the
He
beer.
didn't even.
Eddie like stands, like hops over the couch essentially to get on the couch and sit
Right?
down. It was just so
And like,
like
listen, they are,
funny.
if nothing else, they're still best friends.
Yeah.
And
That's very
I
best
love.
friend behavior.
He was there when Buck Tommy began. He is there for Buck when it ends. And I know there's stuff in future episodes I'm definitely going to have some things to say on, but at least in this episode, like I did love just seeing them, you know, Buck's been there a lot for Eddie, Eddie's being there for Buck now. And so yeah, best friends.
We love
Um
it.
we do. So okay, final thoughts all around. I know we have done definitely a lot of thoughts talking, but just anything anyone else wants to add.
I mean, I liked these episodes. Yes, like some parts of it I would have rather that we not got, but like it does it does like make sense, and I feel like some things were bound to happen, whether if it was now or a couple episodes for now or whenever it was. So like yeah, and we'll see what happens. I think it'll definitely be an interesting arc, not only for Buck, but for like all the other characters. Like I'm now realizing that like now we're gonna see Maddie be pregnant in this season, and
Mm-hmm.
I know in um 8B we'll get that more. I don't think besides Chim anybody knows or anything in the next few episodes. I don't think it really comes up, but it's definitely going to be interesting when it does come up and just different things. I'm excited for um I don't know. I'm excited for a lot of things to happen, but overall it was there was things I didn't want, but overall they were pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like there were some great parts to these episodes. I think the writing was pretty good for certain things. There were some things I wish wouldn't have happened or would have happened differently.
Hmm.
But you know, remind me of some similar 911. I'm getting like I am curious. Like obviously we have this is what episode 5 and 6, and we have like a few more episodes to talk about before the 8B
Yeah,
starts.
7 and 8.
So, we've still got some stuff to talk about, and I definitely am nervous about some things coming up, but I'm also like looking forward to just what they decide to do, and also a little worried about what they decide to do.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with any being a fan of any show. Like you're
Oh
always going
yeah.
to be wondering, like, what are those behind the
Especially when
scenes
it's still
photos we're
airing.
getting? Yeah,
Yeah.
like when you see that behind the scenes photo of two characters hugging, it's like, okay, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so you just kind of like, oh, okay. But yeah,
Is this a yay hug? Is this a a
Right?
sad hug? Is this a hug of death? Is this like what is happening here?
yeah. And I, we just recently had, big crazy moment of like a scene of Oliver and Ryan were filming, and somebody happened to be on set and was filming it, and so a lot of images, pictures, questions, a lot of questions, pro and con, like what was going on. And I'm like, I'll just wait until the show airs to figure out what's going on, because I have no control over what the writers write.
Yeah.
It's like I wish I could, but I don't. Yeah. So I don't know. It's 911. Sketch your emergencies. I'm hoping Ravi comes back and we get some Ravi because I miss him. But there really hasn't thus far been a place for him with the full truck and ambulance right now. So we'll see what happens.
I think for me, I feel like maybe I'm a little bit more critical of the season so far. I just feel like maybe it's just coming off of the high of the season 7, which was just an amazing season, and I just haven't felt so far that season 8 has lived up to it. Maybe that was just me putting a lot of expectations on ABC itself. But like I think to me a little bit the writing has just felt a little bit off, and I haven't really been able to pinpoint why. I don't know if they changed writers, if someone new is in the writers' room. I don't know. I don't know what's happening backstage, so I don't, or behind the scenes. So I don't know why, but it just feels like again the pacing felt a little odd at times. The delivery of the lines, or maybe they were the lines themselves, like also felt a little odd. So I think I maybe have my little picks here and there. But I will say, first of all, I did really like episode 5. Episode 5 was good for the most part, other than I occasionally muted it because a couple of the deliveries were just odd for me. Other than that, I really did enjoy the episode. It felt like classic 911, if that makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
season 4 era 911 a little bit. Which that's one of my favorite seasons, so that's
Yeah, me
great.
too.
Obviously I have issues with the 6th one. It's just so marred for me by the breakup of Buck Tommy, but there are definitely things I love in it. Like, Madney's not failed me yet. So I love them. I love them getting the baby. And obviously I love everything else happening. Obviously we've got to acknowledge Hen and Karen's arcs as well. They've been going through a lot for a few seasons now. I maintain that I would love to see them, like, as far as drama with them, I'd love to see it move away from the kids a little bit. I feel like that's getting a little worn. But obviously I love seeing them as an established family unit. So overall, these couple episodes, pretty good. I will say, especially the emergencies, feel like old school emergencies. I felt like we kind of had moved away from emergencies a little bit, if that makes sense. Like having just them there just because, instead of rather it's somehow overarching into the regular plot. Obviously, they're carrying themes with them into the plot, like the kids or the pumpkin injuring Buck or whatever. But
Right.
but they're good, just good classic emergencies, and I've missed them. And I was also like, I'm just really happy to see them back. This is a little rambly, but overall, I definitely have things I love, and I definitely have some things I'm not as fond of. So I'm interested to watch the next couple episodes, and I'm very interested to see what the second half of season 8 brings, because I really feel like it's going to be a make or break for me as far as just my general feelings. But that is a lot. How many are we doing? 18 episodes this season? I keep
Yeah.
forgetting how many.
I think
I
Yeah.
so.
feel like they are. They haven't really specifically said, but I would assume so.
Because they
I'm
did their breakout episode 8, right? Or like after episode 8?
yes, they only made it to 8, so I assume we're gonna get 10 more in the spring.
All right. So yeah, 10 more episodes. There's a lot you can do in that. And honestly,
Yeah.
who knows? We obviously will talk a lot more about our theories and wish lists and stuff later after we finish reviewing these episodes. But other than that, yeah, you know what? I conquered my fear of watching these episodes, and that's all I could ask for. Um, Katie, did we have any fan thoughts? I know you put out a thing, but I don't know if people would
I
respond
don't think we do. I know
later.
these episodes are hard because people watched them so long ago, but we will be covering set or 7 next week and then 8 the week after, the day that the show will come back. So you guys can always let us know what you think of
Or are
those
we not doing
then.
them together?
No.
Oh, I don't know why I thought we were doing them together and then doing like a theories or something. I don't know. Maybe I mixed that up in my head. Okay, cool. So scratch the whole wish list theories from things I said before. But I
Yeah.
know we'll definitely talk about it in like future episodes.
Yeah. It was only
Okay.
because, yeah, if we separated all of them,
Yeah.
that it wouldn't have been in time. So it was just like we needed
Fair enough.
3 weeks of episodes essentially.
But, okay, so 7 next week, 8 the week after. Can't believe it's coming back so soon. It's finally here.
I know. It's like the Lone Star season went by like too quick, but then like
Oh my
this,
gosh,
y-
yes.
it just like once we got through those episodes, I was like, damn, that one really does come back so soon.
It really does. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us and listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you all get your podcasts, and be sure to check out our website at 901lsroundup.com. You guys can also follow the podcast on our socials at 901LS Roundup on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. As always, be sure to join our Discord server. The link will be in the description of this podcast and also on our website.
You guys can follow me, Katie, at the Love of Tarlos on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads.
You guys follow me, Grace, Everin, and Rafa 901 on Instagram and Threads.
You can follow me, EJ, at EJ8302 on Instagram and Threads. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.